What is going on, Rotogrinders? Dean here. It's Dean 7904 if you want to get all technical. I mean, it's 10:10 on the East Coast, 7:10 on the West Coast, 9:10 Tennessee time. Of course, it's time for the flagship show here at Rotogrinders. It's called Grinderslive. We're starting 3 hours off NFL DFS Week 12. Joining me today, batting first. I'm excited about one person here. The other person's Grant. It's Chief Justice. Chief, I think this is your first time actually here. Of course, you guys know Chief. If you're premium members, you know his content all over the RG site. You see him from the Blitz show, which I watched yesterday, which is good times. And I don't know how relevant the stuff you guys talked about yesterday, because I'm not sure if you've heard this, Chief. And nobody's probably put it in this sort of terms. The slate, if you could imagine this, it's been turned on its head. Have you heard? I mean, could you imagine how that works?
Absolutely. In fact, most of it started at the end of the Blitz show yesterday. And my whole process changed. I was probably going to have 5 or 6 quarterbacks, probably 5. And in the middle of the show, I said, well, probably only have 3 quarterbacks now. And it's been an eventful past. We did that show around 1 o'clock Eastern time yesterday. So it's been an eventful, 19 hours. It's going to be really exciting to get going here this morning.
How about yourself, Grant? I know you're playing the road team today. I believe you. I was going to say you're in parts unknown, but you confirm with us. I guess we can tell the people. Sure, why not? You're not on the run. You're not on the lam, as far as I know. You're out there in Salt Lake City. Grant, what your thoughts as far as the slate? This is one of those deals like if you did content 3, 4, or 5 days ago, if you made lineups 3, 4, or 5 days ago, you can kind of sort of throw them away. So what we're going to talk about, what's going. We're not going to go through all the body parts. Don't worry about it, Grant. But we'll talk about them organically throughout the show. As far as all the guys that are in, all the guys that are out, and it's an absolute disaster out there. But you have a general thought as far as this slate today, Grant?
Fade the chalk.
Oh, okay.
Not what you were expecting me to say. No, there's some chalky spots here for sure, and it's just interesting how much so many guys are going to be owned. Just straight off the bat, there's easy pivots for just slightly more money from the extreme chalk. I'm not playing a ton today, at least over on DraftKings and FanDuel. I'm playing a lot on other sites, but there's no guarantees that Brian Hill or Hines are going to go off for a big game. We've seen literally stone cold minimum running backs be 50 to 70% owned and put up a dud. It's a week where I think there's actually a lot of value in big field tournaments and in cash. Cash is just super easy today.
It's sort of tricky. I think it's like trying to get the right cheap running back and the right cheap receiver is gonna go a long way as far as the slate.
20 different cash game lineups like you always do, so you can post a screenshot of I've crushed in cash.
What? You're saying I screenshot my cash team? Is that what
I wouldn't know?
suggesting?
I muted you a while ago.
Oh, well, why would you mute me, Grant? I just put you on Twitter. I even tagged you. Is that why you didn't retweet?
Is that why I didn't get a notification?
I don't know. Why I don't know why you would mute me, but fair enough. Understood. That's firm but fair. We're going to, of course, break it down position by position, quarterback, receiver, running backs, tight ends, defenses. I guess we'll kind of talk about them too. We'll throw out some of our favorite stacks as well. As we progress, we hand it off to, I believe, later on afterwards, it's Bimeford. And it's going to be Tambo. They sort of show off all the tools here at Rotogrinders. They show off the lineup HQ. And Devin's going to be showing that off as well, too, as we're sort of talking about it. So if you want to use that at your own leisure, if you want to use that tool at your own leisure, hey, you can get yourself $5 off. The link's going to go ahead and be dropped in chat. Where is the chat? It's YouTube chat. What's up, YouTube? Subscribe, notifications smash. Do you have an adjective of choice, Chief, as far as, how do you like to touch I don't want to be presumptuous. If you are going to touch the like button, how would you like to go about doing that?
Smash is good. I like smash.
All right. Smash is the chalk, though, right? I feel like that's a chalk adjective. You're not a chalky guy.
No, I believe the chalk is click. Click.
No, nobody says click. That's not sexy.
Oh, have you ever seen the movie?
Smash, pound,
it's outstanding.
Hammer. They're all synonyms in my book.
The movie Click is so bad.
Yeah. Did you know that Henry Winkler was in that?
Yes, I'm aware of the Fonz. Yes. He's great in Barry. I'll say that. He's awesome in Barry. But we're getting off track.
He's awesome in Waterboy.
That's our tournament word. Smush. Smush that like button.
I'm pretty sure smush means something entirely different, especially if you're on the Jersey Shore.
Well, yeah, you get smushed in the face.
GTLS. Is that how that works, Jim Tan? All right. Hey, let's talk about some quarterbacks. We haven't. It feels like we haven't had Mahomes.
Dean, when was the last time you saw the sun?
I was in like 2-3 days ago. Yeah, I went to Honey Baked Ham. I had to wait in line for 2.5 hours for. Oh, it was an experience. You don't want to hear about it. It wasn't very exciting, but yeah. Hey, yeah. So that was good times for sure. Happy Thanksgiving belated for everybody out there. Hope you all had a good time. Everybody survived. All right, so let's talk about quarterbacks. Let's talk about Patrick Mahomes. Well, both you guys are tournament guys. I'm sort of the cash donkey here. I don't want to label anybody, but just label myself.
Donkey is the correct label.
Yeah, fair enough. Chief, I'm going to hand it off to you first as far as how we're handling quarterbacks today. Mahomes, it looks like he's the highest projected quarterback here against the Tampa defense. That's, you want to call him a funnel for sure. That's the way to go. They're harder to run against as they are as a pass against. I don't really care who Mahomes is playing. He's basically you really can't defend him. You can only hope to contain him. I think that's the old Dan Patrick line there. Mahomes, what are you doing with Mahomes, and kind of bleed out from there? If you want to talk about the matchup there in Buffalo, which people are excited about as far as quarterbacks as is. What do you have for me?
Well, the people know I'm always going to tell them exactly what I'm doing, and quite frankly, I'm only playing 3 quarterbacks this week, and that was a move that started yesterday on the Blitz show. I'm only playing Mahomes, Allen, and Fitzpatrick, and those are the only quarterbacks I'm going to have in the pool this week. I think Mahomes is in a good spot. This is a week where I'm not saying you play Mahomes naked, because one of these guys is probably going off, probably 2 of them. But my point is, I do think Mahomes is a guy that you can get away with playing naked. Let's just say, Tyreek Hill goes off for 8 catches, 80 yards, and doesn't get in the box, and then has a rush for 2 rushes for 30 yards. And let's say all the touchdowns go to some random guy a Pringle or Robinson or Mecole Hardman. Sammy Watkins is back now. And look, I'm not saying that's what we have to do. I'm just saying in the realm of, let's just say Mahomes is the highest scoring quarterback. I think there's enough value in other spots that we can play Mahomes naked this week. So that's something I may have in a few bills, just some Mahomes naked, and kind of going from there. And then with these other guys, Fitzpatrick, he's going to be my highest owned quarterback of the week. I'm probably going to be. In fact, I'm at 40% right now. I'm looking at it, and I'm probably going to hold right there. I've got Mahomes at 30 and Allen at 30, and that's just going to be my approach. I'm sticking with the guys that I feel like can carry me to the top of the finish line. And look, Brady's going to be fine. I think. I think Derek Carr is going to be fine. I even think Cam's going to be fine. But these 3 are where I'm going to stake my flag this week, and I'm going to roll it from there.
I want to stick with you because, Grant, I'll get you in a second, but there's a couple of follow-up questions I have. One, how concerned are you, if at all, with Brown being out? We've seen the splits as far as Allen's numbers without Brown. You could say that's wonky if you want to, small sample stuff. Allen's been distinctly better with Brown on the field, though Brown today. Well, first of all, to tackle that question, your thoughts. And then as far as, the Fitzpatrick thing, I think you're more of a FanDuel guy than a DK guy. And in my head, I think he's a better play on DK than he is on FanDuel. Where are you predominantly playing today?
On FanDuel. But, listen, I build on DraftKings just to make sure I'm prepared. And, it's pretty similar in my book just because of the pricing. I don't feel like anybody's, crazily high-priced or, and like I said, there's so much value on DK anyway. But I'm not really worried about John Brown being out. Cole Beasley is still there. Diggs is still there. They'll play a little bit more Gabriel Davis. I think the running backs may be involved in a little bit more in the passing game this week as well. I'm not going to play any of the running backs, but I do think that's an out that'll give him a little bit more security. But I feel fine about it. I think they'll use Gabriel Davis to stretch the field a little bit, just as they use John Brown. And furthermore, I'm not really worried about the Chargers defense. So the Chargers, if you look at the games they've been in, they've all been pretty tight, high-scoring games. So and then they end up losing at the end. So I'm not worried about the Chargers in the slightest. It's full steam ahead with this Buffalo Bills offense with Josh Allen at the helm.
All right, Grant, I'm going to unmute you. You're free to talk now. Fitzpatrick, I know he's your guy. You must be super thrilled. You've always been a homer for him and well positioned against the Jets. You want to call it a revenge game? Sure, why not? I suppose. I think Carr is right there, and on DK, I'm kind of going back and forth between those two, and of course, I'm going to have iterations of both. Carr versus Fitzpatrick, if you're not spending all the way up as far as quarterbacks.
In cash, it's Fitzpatrick. I mean, going up against one of the worst pass defenses in the league, that Fitzpatrick has put up a boatload of points numerous times over many, many years. But it's Fitzpatrick. Like, game script can be a little bit bad for him, but realistically, this is a guy that had 4 straight weeks of 23-plus fantasy points before he was benched. Last matchup versus the Jets didn't go as well, but the Jets have been a little bit better, and they should keep things a little bit closer. But in tournaments, it's absolutely Derek Carr. Like, I'm not understanding this 2.8% Derek Carr ownership.
I'm not either.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me at all. It's the easiest thing in the world to pair him. If you just pair him with Waller. If Carr goes off, then Waller 100% goes off on a slate where tight end's not very good, on a slate where people are going to go with Kelsey more than Waller, which I also don't understand. Like, Derek Carr is 5.7K. The Raiders have the second highest total on the board, and at certain sites, they have a 0.5 or higher implied total. Like, it's just a simple spot here where the Raiders, if you're not playing Carr, why are you not playing Jacobs? Like, it's that simple. Jacobs is going to come in as the 5th highest owned running back this week. So if you're not playing Jacobs, that means that the 28 points are more than likely going to come from somewhere else, and that somewhere else is going to be Derek Carr, unless Booker comes in and just screws people over. But Derek Carr is probably the best tournament play on the entire slate. I'm right there with Chief Justice. Those 3 got Mahomes, Allen, Fitzpatrick are the main 3 guys I'm playing. But I'm also adding in a lot of Murray and a ton of Derek Carr. It's just real simple. Murray is the perfect pivot off of Mahomes at way less ownership, and you don't really need to pair him with anyone. Like, everyone's going to be pairing Mahomes with people. Murray can get it done with his legs easily, even against the Patriots. They may just try and shut down Hopkins, and Murray will get it done with his legs. But there are 5 great quarterbacks to play on this slate, and one of them's going way under-owned.
Yeah, I mean, we should say, let's cut Jimeno and his team a break. Obviously, the closer and closer we get the lock as far as these ownership projections, the more refined they become. And I agree with you. I think it's going to go over that number that's currently projected at. Matt Ryan's at 10%. I think that's going to push down a little bit with Julio being out to some degree. Julio presumed out, actives 11:30 as far as the 1 o'clock game. So we're assuming he's not going to give it a go. At least that's the reports are on the old Twitter machine. Taysom Hill is now priced up to some degree there against Denver, and like, how much is he going to actually have to do? That game has a total of 37 or something goofy like that. Of course, Denver 11.5. They don't really have a quarterback. The only place you can play that quarterback is on FanDuel. I believe it's 6K. And actually, you're all over the dark websites there, Grant. You can play him on Super Draft, I believe. Does that sound right?
Like what?
The quarterback for Denver today. I don't know why I'm losing.
Yeah, the dark websites, by the way.
The dark website. So much money there today.
We've gone off the rails at quarterback. The dark websites.
What is your guys' projections for points for Hinton today?
I don't know. I was watching some of his highlights in college, and he's competent and he can run, it looks like, but I don't know. Jump in. I mean, Chief, I haven't put much thought into it because I'm just not playing him because I'm playing the standard sites, I guess. So I don't know.
Look, man, if FanDuel was going to give me a layup and give me 4K for him at wide receiver, I would have played him this week. He's 6K at quarterback. I'm not playing him. Like I said, I'm sticking with those 3 guys. I do want to jump back on something that Grant talked about, though. And like I said, I started the week, or yesterday, I came into the Blitz show with 5 quarterbacks, and Carr was one of those quarterbacks along with Brady. But, I think you guys have probably learned how I approach tournaments right now, or most of the time. And if I really like a guy, I want to go ahead and get way over the field. If I'm confident enough that he's going to – I think Fitzpatrick is going to outscore Brady and Carr. And so for that reason, you realize I'm at, 40% on him. All I did was take away my Brady shares and my Carr shares and rolled them into Fitzpatrick. And, and then I bumped up Allen and Mahomes to 30. And that's pretty much how I got there. But I do still like Derek Carr. Obviously, I'm going to have some of his pieces. But I just think Fitzpatrick is going to outscore them both today. And that was my reason for getting rid of those other 2 quarterbacks that I had.
Speaking of Denver, it's kind of a good segue to talk about the Monkey Knife Fight promo we have going on here, because it'll bleed into a couple of players that I thought, you pick under, you pick over, you get 3 out of 5, you're good to go. Here, go ahead. The link's going to be dropped in chat for you guys. Users get 3 months of free Rotogrinders premium with their first deposit and a $100 deposit bonus up to $50. Use the promo code Grinders. And you guys can tell me if I'm right or if I'm wrong. I feel like the Monkey Knife Fight, Grant, I know you do some content there as well, as far as, from the gambling perspective. Total fantasy points: Noah Fant 10.5, Hamler 8.5 fantasy points. Just as long as they don't score a touchdown, they're not getting that, right?
Yeah, no. To just pop the unders on those, it's half point PBR. So I think it's half point PBR. I mean, let's be honest. Hinton might not complete 10 passes. So
yeah, I mean, they might run some wildcat. Freeman can throw the ball. He's competent. What do you have here, Chief?
Look, man, I think they're going to sneak a touchdown in on a trick play, and I think the Saints know this, but I don't think they know when it's coming. It's going to be some weird end around throwback, and Hamler or Judy or somebody's going to be just running right down the field wide open, and that's how they're going to get this touchdown. I would still smush the under on both of those. But I think that's the way they score a touchdown in this game.
I have a feeling their offense is pretty much going to be what the Bills' offense from 2 years ago. Like, send them downfield, look downfield, run. And that's what's going to be. So it's just going to be a whole lot of downfield passing or running the ball. And that's pretty much it. Because if he seems like he's competent enough to throw the ball to a certain spot 40 yards down the field, and that's pretty much it.
Well, yeah, they'll probably – I think you're right, Grant. Down the field, I would throw in probably 5 to 10-yard outs and the quick slant and some RPO. Like, that's probably their offense today in a vacuum. Read option, quick slants, outs, probably some dig routes and then RPO. That's probably where they're going to be, like, all game long, and all they got to do is just sit on it.
Is anybody playing like a Freeman under he's 4K on DK? I assume he's basically the same 4.5 on FanDuel. There's so much other value we'll get to. 10.5.
There's no reason for them to play Freeman at QB.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing. Why would they do it? This guy was an actual QB in college. Freeman was not. Like, the difference between a college, like, he started at Wake Forest for 3 years, right?
Yeah,
like, the only reason he switched to wide receivers because he got suspended, and then he's like, well, I'm not going to make the NFL as a quarterback. So
yeah, I remember Hinton too, but man, right off the streets, I don't know.
We got anything else as far as quarterbacks that we're talking about? Obviously, you can run a whole bunch down. Allen Mahomes, Ryan Fitzpatrick. That's Matt Ryan and Ryan Fitzpatrick. I was doing a Wheel of Fortune before and after there, apparently. Murray, Herbert. We didn't talk about Herbert for sure. He's in play, obviously. Taysom, I don't know. I think he's fine, but I don't expect to get there. And I just think Denver wants to get that game over with as fast as possible. Brady is an interesting run back with Kansas City. It's hard to pick the run back, but I think Antonio's the guy to go with. You're going to pick one of them. How about Teddy? Talk about your team there, Chief, because I've seen Teddy popping in some places, which surprised me. Anderson's popping in some places, which it's fine, but yeah.
Well, let's talk about this and let's think this thing through. I mean, we just saw, last week, not Thursday, last Sunday, we saw the Cowboys and Andy Dalton just push the ball down the field on the Minnesota Vikings. And, I feel like right now Teddy's better than Andy Dalton. Teddy's been pretty efficient this year. I think they're going to move the ball fine. The question is, can they keep the ball long enough to outscore the Vikings? Because, the Vikings are going to keep pounding the ball on the ground, for 50% of their game plan. So I think Teddy's fine. I think if the Vikings, get up in this game, let's say by 10. And here's the other thing, too. Like, in our heads, we think the game script is that the Vikings are going to be up on the Panthers, right? Like, that's our game script. But it could very well be the other way around, where Teddy's just coming out, gunslinging for the first half, and they score 21 points, and they're all, passing touchdowns. So I like Teddy this week. I definitely think it's viable to play him. I'm going to have plenty of his receivers. But once again, I'm concentrating my quarterback play to 3 guys. But I do like Teddy. And I did start out the week thinking I was going to play Baker Mayfield against the Jaguars. Like in my head, I said, oh, this is the week to get the Baker 5-touchdown game. And then I got off of it because they're just, they're just not throwing the ball enough at all.
Well, it's a weird thing. They haven't thrown the ball because they haven't been in conditions to throw the ball. Yeah,
I know. And I thought about that. Yeah, I thought about all those scenarios. So I to combat that, I'm not playing Baker, but I have his receivers. So, that's kind of where I'm at. But Baker is a guy that was pretty high on my list earlier this week, and I got off of him.
You don't need the salary savings with Mike Glennon, he basically went out and said a YOLO. He's like, yeah, look, I don't know when the next time I'm going to be able to play again or start an NFL game, so I'm just going to let it fly. Glennon starting the game for Jacksonville. Cleveland's without their 2 best defenders. Mayfield on the other side is with, Jacksonville, their whole secondary is ravaged. I mean, this is kind of one of those sneaky games that can go off, I suppose. Not a lot of sexy names to roster, and we'll talk about running backs in a second. We might just see Chubb and Hunt get 45-plus touches combined, which wouldn't surprise me either. Grant, you want to clean up quarterbacks and anything we've sort of missed? Obviously, you can't talk about everybody.
Not really. Like I told you, I've just only a certain amount of people that I am playing. But play Derek Carr in tournaments. Pair him with Waller. Pair him with Aguilar, which is just weird to say.
No, he's got a pretty good price on FanDuel too. I think he's like 5.2 or 5.3 over there, which a lot of FanDuel raises a lot of their players as like the season progresses. He's one guy that for whatever reason has not really seen his price raise. And also, Teddy, it's his another revenge game. There you go against Minnesota. Let's move on and talk about running backs. Good segue because Dalvin Cook is the clear and obvious uber chalk. They can't price him up high enough. I believe he's $11K on FanDuel, 10 super expensive on DK as well. But the matchup obviously is really solid. We're looking at fantasy points here, Chief, at running backs. This is like our projections that I pulled up, or maybe this is the Blitz projections I have up in front of me. Dalvin Cook is projected to score. This is like mean, obviously. 8 more fantasy points than the second best running back in the slate. Like, when do you ever see that? That's just wild.
Yeah, for sure, man. Dalvin's definitely at the top of the list. And you guys know I play cash games, but that's not my specialty. My specialty is tournaments. And man, look, yesterday my plan was to lock in Dalvin Cook. He's so expensive though. It just the rest of my bill I couldn't quite finagle it right. But I am double the field today on Dalvin, and I think that's the right play. He should be the highest scoring running back on the slate. I mean, and look. The thing is, what you're looking for is you really probably want him to get 30 today. If you're really going to lap the field, and look, he's projected close to 30 on DK right now, 27.06. And look, the other thing too is Dalvin last week against the Cowboys. Adam Thielen catches 1 touchdown right there on the goal line. He could have very well been right up there in his usual wheelhouse, which might have priced him up even more on DK. He probably would have been 10K had he hit 30 last week. So Dalvin is a guy I'm going to be extremely heavy on. If you're playing in tournaments, you need to find a way to get over the field. I don't think 30% is high enough. So if you're playing him, I wouldn't match the field. I'm double the field right now. Wanted to hit the lock button, couldn't quite get there. But I think you need to have at least 25% more in the field on Dalvin today to try to catch the upside that I think he's going to have in this spot.
Yeah, you got to spend up as far as your cash games, just play him in there. But tournaments, it's an interesting conversation as far as what you want to do. Grant, what are you doing as far as Dalvin Cook, who we're seeing at 35% ownership projection, give or take?
I've learned my lesson about fading him. Like, I'll probably be slightly over the field. Like, it's just that simple. We have one workhorse back, play him in cash. In tournaments, like, he's so touchdown dependent. I'm just going to play a bit of him. Like, I don't have a strong take on him. We know that he's going to get the volume. We know that he has high touchdown equity. We know he has a good matchup. We know what he is. I'm just going to play him. Like, probably slightly more than the field. I'm going to have that just be out of my like thought process. I'm pretty much going to play him what he's owned.
Let's just jump to the cheapies for a second, and then we'll kind of work our way back up. Hines there for Indianapolis versus Tennessee. We know Taylor's not going to be playing today. He's projected to have a high ownership. He can both run the ball and catch the ball as well. Former Orlando Magic head coach Brian Hill is the starting running back today for Atlanta. Of course, there's no Todd Gurley. Nice matchup in a dome. Floor asking price $4K on DK. I want to say he's $5K on FanDuel as well. The Matt Breida situation, I don't know if it is a situation there in Miami, but they're without Gaskin. They're without Ahmed. He looks like kind of sort of the last man standing. Like they traded for him in the offseason. So in theory, they thought he had something. They haven't given him the ball basically all season long. He has been injured, of course, as well, too. They did trade for somebody, a couple weeks ago. So they do have bodies. Washington is there. Laird is still there lurking. As far as your favorite cheapie at running back, who do we feel most confident about, Chief?
Well, I think this is a good discussion to talk about because, the guy that I'm probably I'm going to start with the guy that I'm over the field on, and then I'll work my way backward, okay? He is in that range. And honestly, it's not necessarily a straight-up true pivot, although it's going to look that way. I just think this guy is going to get more work than we're anticipating, and all the ownership is funneling to one guy, and that's Mr. Wilkins out there in Indianapolis. He's a guy – I'm going to have about 25% Wilkins today. Look, here's the deal. We saw him in a somewhat of a workhorse role. I can't remember if they were playing Detroit or something like that. The guy got 19 carries. I think he had almost 90 yards and a touchdown. If he gets that at this price, I'm perfectly fine accepting that. And I just think I think it's going to be a lot more of a split than we're anticipating. And so the field is looking like Hines is going to get maybe 60, 70% of the carries, and Wilkins is going to get, 30 to 40%, which could be true. But it could also be true the other way, where Wilkins gets 60 to 70% or predominantly all the actual carries. And if they fall down the goal line and he runs in 2 touchdowns, well, now he's your guy. So I wanted to point that out because Wilkins is a guy I'm going to be well over the field on because I think the field has adjusted to this news improperly. Not saying that Hines isn't a great play. I'm saying I think the field has adjusted improperly. So Wilkins is a guy I'm going to be really heavy on. I actually like Brian Hill probably better than Hines this week. And we know that Hines is going to catch the passes, but I think Brian Hill has a better road to a workhorse role than Hines does. So those are the things I'm looking at. Wayne Gallman is another guy. He's already getting 60% of the carries. I like him as well. And then last but not least, I think we're overlooking Austin Eckler. We've got him at 10%. Kalen Ballage is already not going to play. They don't like Joshua Kelly. Troy Maine Pope has been non-existent. I think Eckler comes out to a full workhorse role. And if that's the case, Eckler should be over 7K. He's just not over 7K today. I think he's 6,100 on DK, 6,500 on FanDuel. I'm going to be about 20 to 25% Eckler, which is going to be probably double the field. Maybe he catches some steam as we go along, but I think we've misread this whole Indianapolis situation, and I think Wilkins may end up being the guy, and that's why I'm going to stake my flag there. I have plenty of Hines, but I have a lot more Wilkins than the field.
Yeah, we're seeing Hines at 36% ownership right now on DK, and
Wilkins is like probably
4%. Yeah, and
come on, guys. Come on.
They've done hot hand there too in Indianapolis. So you're right. Goofy things can happen. And Hines, to me, on paper, looks like the better play. But if you want to play the ownership game, I totally understand that. Eckler, you got him for more than 16 touch. That's the one where I think people are going to throw their hands up and say, I don't know what's going to happen here because, he's coming back from a serious injury. He's been out for at least a month plus. You think he just walks right into the 20 touches? I don't know. I don't know if he needs 20 touches at that price. Okay, Grant. Well, you follow up on that.
All right. So on Eckler, they're not going to play him if he's not fully healthy. Like they have no reason. They're not winning. They're not going to the playoffs. Blah 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 blah. Like they're going to play him if he is actually healthy, and I believe that he's actually healthy. So he's a fantastic play. The Hines Wilkins situation. How many times do you think Hines has had over 10 carries? His entire
maybe once or twice.
3 times. He had it once this year, twice his rookie season. That's it. Where he goes is if they're down and they have to pass the ball. Like he is productive in the passing game. This is a spot where they're probably going to run the ball a decent amount because that's what they're going to do. That's what they always do. They're going to run, and it's mostly a hot hand approach. They're currently a 3-point favorite. If you want to play Hines or Wilkins, like Wilkins, you can play wherever, whenever, however you want. he's going to come in at way too low ownership. 1/10 of Hines. So much of their value is going to be touchdown dependent. And so playing Wilkins, if he gets a touchdown, then that's just an automatic. You get 6 extra points on the field or 12 extra points on the field, a 12-point swing, whatever it is. So play Hines if you're in the lineups, you're playing Derrick Henry. If the Titans are up, they're going to be running the ball with Derrick Henry. Hines is going to be in on a lot of passing downs, and Hines is going to get a lot of volume in the passing game. Wilkins, if they're up, they're probably going to be running the ball, and they're probably going to be running the ball with Wilkins. So I'm going to have a rule pretty much in every single lineup where I have Hines. I'm going to have Derrick Henry in there on the other side. Henry's not going to come in very high owned. We're talking about running back, so we might as well throw him in there. It's a perfect correlation there that if you're playing a chalky guy, you run the game script, in which case, if he goes off, then that means that Henry goes off in all likelihood.
If you're playing Wilkins, are you more apt to play Brown or Davis?
I don't mind that, yeah. It's not a requirement, because if you're playing Wilkins, you're not just playing strictly based on correlation. You're playing on Wilkins getting the touchdowns. You're playing on Wilkins probably playing from ahead, but you don't need to play anyone over on the other side of the passing game, although Brown and Davis are great comebacks. But Wilkins, you're not only just betting on them being ahead, but you're also betting that he's the one that got the touchdowns, that this isn't a 50-50 or a 70-30 split. It's actually closer to a 50-50 split, or Wilkins is the hot hand. You're pivoting off of Brian Hill. You're doing all sorts of stuff. So Wilkins is in play no matter what. But Hines, I only want to play him if I'm playing a game script where they have to pass the ball.
You mentioned Henry, by the way. Henry gets a nice bump there with all the injuries on the Indianapolis side, so I think he becomes a little more interesting. And that's the thing with Cook is you can move off of Cook and Cook and one of the cheapies, like Cook and Hill or something like that, however you want to do a 2v2, and you can pivot, Chief, to Henry and Chubb, right? That's something you can basically. That's kind of sort of similar as far as the asking price, and that's a good lead into the conversation as far as Cleveland. Great matchup against Jacksonville. I guess we can talk about Robinson on the other side, who gets all the touches in the world, and once again, probably touches the ball about 25 times today against the Cleveland side, again, without two of their best defenders. Your thoughts on the running backs in that game, and feel free to talk about Henry as well.
Yeah, man, look, I like Robinson, man. I think he's going to be fine. But guess what? I am fading him today. Not because I don't like him. I just have to take stands. I try to keep a pretty tight pool. So he's a guy that just didn't make the cut. Just because I don't know, I don't know if these guys are going to get in the end zone today. That's something I can't predict. So I just decided to fade him to get some shares of some other guys. So that's kind of where I am with him. On the other side, look, I like Chubb and Kareem Hunt. I have more Kareem Hunt right now, just because of what I've looked at the past few weeks. But this is another situation I view just like Hines and Wilkins, where Chubb could end up getting 60% of the work today. Now that's not the trend they showed us, but if they're up in this game and Chubb gets 25 carries, he could be a monster here. So I'm going to have a pretty good exposure to Chubb and Kareem Hunt, and so that's kind of where I am with that game.
You got a take on that, Grant? I
like Hunt a lot. I didn't get a chance to talk about him because Dean just likes to make me not talk. You son of a biscuit.
Well, the bell went off. PTI. We got to go to the next conversation.
Sure, Dean. Hunt. In games where Chubb has played, Hunt is still getting pretty massive volumes. Most games where Chubb has played, Hunt has been the better play. Hunt has gotten more points in games that Chubb has played in 8 out of 15 or something like that. So Hunt at 5.6K, drastically cheaper than Chubb, going up against a team that they're likely going to be leading in a game where they're probably going to rush the ball 40 times. Hunt is barely more expensive he's 1,000 more expensive than Hine. He's 1,600 more expensive than Hill. He's 800 cheaper than Robinson. Hunt's going to come in at very, very low ownership compared to these other guys. And he has better upside and probably a better floor. Hunt with Chubb in the game, most every time gets 10 plus points, and a lot of the time ends up in the 20-point range. This is a fantastic spot against a horrible defense in a game where they're going to be leading. Everything kind of points towards Hunt, and he probably has more touchdown equity than Chubb. I think he's had more touchdowns than Chubb in games where they played together. Everything kind of points towards Hunt at 1,500 cheaper as pivots off of the other chalky guys. So Hunt at sub 10% ownership is fantastic. And then another guy to pivot off to, like, why aren't we playing Gallman?
Well, I'll tell you why. It's interesting because I see people asking about in the chat.
I have plenty, by the way, plenty of Gallman.
Go ahead.
Well, last thing too, because so here's the deal, because I've been tracking this. Gallman, before all this other cheap running back news, Gallman was at 14%. Like I was watching it all week. And I said, man, I thought I might have been able to get a little bit sneaky with Gallman, getting 60% of the touches. And he's had positive touchdown variance, which is the reason for that, which is also the reason for his price hike. Like he's had positive touchdown variance. But the bottom line is you still expect them to beat Cincinnati today with no Burrow and Brandon Allen as the quarterback. Well, I was kind of thinking, well, maybe I should get off Gallman. And then this other cheap running back value came in, and now Gallman's down to 10%. Well, here's the deal. Guess what? I'm not saying, and I'm comparing this to the Hines situation because Hines has all the running back ownership right now. But if Hines is out there 60% and Gallman is out there 60%, yes, Hines is probably going to be involved in the passing game a little bit more. But Gallman is definitely getting more rushing attempts than Hines today. That I would go minus 1,000 on that. I guarantee you Gallman's getting more rushing attempts than Hines. And now Gallman's 4%, where he was 14% earlier this week. Now, what happened in the situation between earlier this week and now? Nothing. It's just you've got these other running backs that everyone wants to play. Gallman is still a good play today. And so now I'm just excited to keep my 15% and be over the field.
I was talking to a friend of mine who just started playing NFL DFS.
Friends.
Well, I mean, I'll use air quotes. I mean, an acquaintance, something like that. Somebody who's using me. I pay them minutes, money to talk to me. So, and they were asking me, they just started playing NFL DFS this year, and they're like, the same thing. Like, why are people not excited to play Wayne Gallman? Look what he's done this year. And I think it's, a lot of us are like Wayne Gallman. We talk about the sexy new toy. He is not a sexy new toy. He's somebody nobody wants. We have a preconceived notion. We just don't want to play this guy. And we have a bias, a negative bias, as a general, DFS across the community. We just don't like Wayne Gallman for whatever, he's just really nothing special about him. But if you look at him this season, and that's what matters, right? And he's also well positioned here against Cincinnati. I know they're getting Alf Morris, whatever reason, 20% of the touches or at least 20% of the snaps, and Deion Lewis is getting some looks as well too. But the point I'm making is like, if we can sort of separate our brain from the name Wayne Gallman and we just got to look at the stats and what he's been doing and the touches and yada yada. And the price, it's a really, really perfectly fine play. And nobody wants to play him because of his name.
They've got a 25 implied total.
Yeah. And we didn't talk about Daniel Jones. I know I've heard some people talk about Daniel Jones this week. I can't do it. That's not for me. I'm more likely to play Gallman or one of his receivers or something like that as opposed to Jones. Let's move on. Let's talk about receivers. We got to keep it moving, boys. By the way, I did mention, for some reason, talking about the idea. At least I don't think I did. The core 4, it's $5 off. The link's gonna be dropped in chat there. Devin's gonna be all over it. If you guys like the tools we're showing off, you want to go all the expert stuff. Chiefs conversation on the blitz with Cardi. Ownership projections, and you want to build out 150 lineups. I'll show you how to do that the next year. That's gonna be following us. Get yourself $5 off. The core 4: football, baseball, basketball, and golf. Basketball, of course, right around the corner. Wide receiver, Chief, start the conversation for us. No surprise, Justin Jefferson with Adam Thielen out is popping as the most popular receiver, pretty fair price, well-positioned against your Carolina Panthers. Ridley without Julio, certainly interesting. Keenan is just getting all the touches in the world, all the looks in the world. Targets, I guess, is what we go with as far as receivers. I believe 1-2. It's 1-2 in the league. Diggs and Allen in that game as far as the most targets they've seen all season long. The receivers at the top, Jefferson, Diggs, Ridley, Allen, how do you separate them if you can?
Yeah, man, I think for me, when you're kind of looking at it in an overall landscape, and this is something I asked Cardi about yesterday, and Cardi gave me some really, really, really good nuggets. Basically, we're anticipating that Jefferson's, target share is going to increase by, roughly, let's say 3%. I'll go 3 to 5% to be safe. If you look at this offense right now, Justin Jefferson on the season has a 22% target share, right? Where I think Thielen was, pushing 28, 30%, somewhere up in there, if I'm not mistaken. And now they're down a tight end. They're also down, their top receiver. And, I definitely think Justin Jefferson is like the play. I also think that Dalvin Cook may pick up a few extra targets. He's at 13% on the season. I'm just going to kind of bump him in that 15 to 16% category. And then because we're on this situation, that leaves us Olabisi Johnson, Chad Beebe, KJ Osborne. I think Olabisi Johnson is going to pick up 15 to 20% of the targets today. And so he's a guy, because we're talking about Jefferson, I want to throw him out there. Like Minnesota isn't going to throw the ball as much as, the Chiefs. But I think we're overlooking the fact that Justin Jefferson is going to be the number one now. And another 15 to 20% of these targets have to go somewhere. And Olabisi Johnson seems to be their longest tenured guy. I think he's going to be on the field. Just want to plug him in. At the top, if I had to choose between Jefferson and Diggs, I'm still going to side with Diggs right now. I know Jefferson's the number one guy, but I feel like Diggs having help with Beasley, with Gabriel, with McKenzie, with the running backs, I think that's very important to receivers. We look at a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster, which while Antonio Brown was there, looked like he was going to be the superstar. And when Antonio Brown leaves, look at his production. Now they've got Deontay Johnson. Now they got Chase Claypool. And so, when you have other weapons to include with your primary, that's what is going to help stretch the defense, keep them honest, and make them great. In this particular situation with Jefferson, I think he's still going to be fine. But I'm still going to side with Diggs because Diggs has more help in that wide receiver room than Justin Jefferson has right now.
Grant, your thoughts as far as the receivers up top?
Up top, play him. Play Jefferson, play Diggs, play Allen, play Ridley. Play him.
Does anybody separate themselves, or just getting shares of all of them?
I'm just getting shares of all of them. The more interesting wide receivers are actually at the bottom today, with everyone paying down at running back. Who is Glennon going to throw the ball to?
Chenault and Cole are super, super cheap. I think they're really interesting on DK. I think you could play one of them in cash, and that's going to be one of the separators as far as deciding how the slate goes. Unless, of course, it's just a middle, just like a balanced lineup. But I think what most people are going to go is they're going to spend up on Mahomes, they're going to spend up on a tight end, and they're going to spend up on Cook, and then make it work with a bunch of cheapies that we've already talked about, the cheap running backs and the cheap receivers. Isabella I think he's still minimum on DK at 3K. You should get the slot there with Fitzgerald being out. The two Jacksonville guys, like Jacksonville's without all the receivers essentially, except for Cole, Chenault, a person named Colin Johnson. They're not great, but they're super, super cheap. And wait for it, Grant, we do live in the world of salary cap. Of course, Cole Beasley, pretty interesting there on Buffalo with Smoke is a Smoke or Smokey? Is it Smoke or Smokey? Smoke? John Brown? There you go. And also Gabriel Davis, the Pride of UCF, is still minimum 3K on DK. Do you have a preference amongst all these cheapies here as far as receivers? Mims is still lurking. I know people are talking about how Darnold likes to throw to the slot, and Mims is not in the slot, so maybe this is a Crowder game with Darnold being back, but he is still super cheap. Brant is still pretty cheap at 3.7K. That's Jakeem, not Neefer. Grant, who's your favorite cheap receivers?
It's definitely Chenault, then Cole, then Grant, probably. Like Mims, yeah, he's fine. He's 3.5K, but there are better situations. He has multiple wide receivers to throw to, and we're not sure if Crowder is going to go back up to the 10-plus targets that he was getting every single game prior to Darnold being injured or Crowder being injured. Whenever Crowder's in the game with Darnold, he's getting volume. So we don't know if it's going to go back to that. So Mims is the guy that's out for me. Like Grant Williams is not in the offense right now, so Grant should see a decent amount of work, and now he's got a better quarterback with Fitzpatrick behind him there. Like if you're not going Parker, Grant's a fantastic play. He's not going to come in at a ton of ownership. So I'm using mostly those guys. In the mid-tier, it's a little bit interesting. Like Cole Beasley, we've seen massive games from this season, multiple times. So Beasley without John Brown in there, we could see a 10, 12 target game. He's going up against the Chargers. Chargers have given up 30 points countless times in the last, 7 games. It's just something they seem to do. Their defense has not been great, and it's probably going to be a higher pace game. So everyone going to Diggs, Beasley's an easy way to kind of pivot off of that. There's no guarantee that Diggs has a crushing game where he ends up with 20-plus points. And there's a lot of situations where he doesn't end up with a touchdown and ends up with 15 points. So Beasley's a fantastic play in the mid-tier. Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore are fantastic plays in the mid-tier. Like there are ways to pivot off of the chalk here. And Jamison Crowder, Like, he's had bigger games than pretty much anyone this season for his price tag of 5.4K. He's got 25-point game. He's got a 24-point game. He's had multiple 10-target games. He hasn't had less than 10 targets if you go back to all the way to the Buffalo game and discount the last 4 weeks. He's had 10 targets in every game with Darnold. So there's a lot of places to pay for in the mid-tier, but like there's a lot of different ways to go on a slate where the chalk is going to be very heavy on Diggs, on Jefferson, on Keenan Allen.
We should mention, by the way, and I didn't mean it, I probably skipped over him, but Tyreek Hill has been getting a ridiculous amount of balls thrown his way, and we know his upside. And if he's not like in the grouping of Allen and Ridley and Diggs and Jefferson, Chief, he should be, right?
Yeah. I love him today. I'm going to have plenty of Tyreek. Also, Dean, I'm very disappointed that you left Olamide Zaccheaus off of that cheap receiver list. We got to get some Zaccheaus exposure. We got to throw him in there. Julio's out. I can just see Zaccheaus running down the sideline now, 50 yards. And, our good friend, Mr. Matt Ryan, is going to throw it up. Zaccheaus is going to be wide open, and Matt Ryan is going to overthrow him. And that's why I'm not playing Matt Ryan. I'm just kidding. That's not going to happen. But, yeah, Zaccheaus did want to put him on the list. This guy is not a wide receiver, but he's a guy I wanted to talk about, and we kind of missed him at running back. But let's just treat him as a wide receiver, right? James White. This is somebody Cardi put me on yesterday. No Burkhead. You got to think James White's getting 6 to 7 targets today, maybe a handful of carries. I think he's in play. Now, back to straight-up wide receivers, as we were talking about. One of the guys that I wanted to mention is Corey Davis. I think is a really good play at 4,900 today. If we're anticipating that Indianapolis is going to be up and that Tennessee's going to have to throw the ball, I think Corey Davis at 4,900 is a spectacular play. And, I mean, if we're looking at the ownership on him right now, we've got him at 5%. I mean, the guy's got a 13.2% projection, but it's going very overlooked. Grant talked about Nelson Aguilar. I like him. Jarvis Landry I expected to be a little bit higher on this week against Jacksonville, but, we're not playing him. The guys on the other side of the Kansas City game, like let's look at the ownership on the Tampa Bay receivers here. Chris Godwin, 5%. Mike Evans, 2%. Antonio Brown, 8%. Like, if this game is going to shoot out, those guys are priced pretty appropriately and affordably, in my opinion. So I just want to highlight that small group there, and I'll get out of your hair.
Brown's my favorite option on Tampa. What's yours? Is it also Brown?
Chris Godwin, actually. But I do like Brown a ton.
Who's your favorite Carolina receiver? Because, I mean, Moore, Anderson, you prefer either, or they're both perfect, they're just fine?
I'm going to take Robbie in this particular case, but I've got enough exposure to all three of them, including Samuel. But Robbie's my favorite by far.
You got an Isabella take?
Just play him. He's one of those cheap guys. Look, I'm going to be rotating all the cheap guys. Isabella, the Jacksonville guys, Zaccheaus, Olabisi Johnson, all of those cheap guys. Grant, I'm just going to keep rotating them.
Grant, what do you have for me as far as some receivers we may have missed? We got to move on and talk about tight ends in a second, but I feel like we covered most of them, or at least kind of mentioned the names of most of them in passing here.
One I do want to talk about more. Curtis Samuel's had over 20 points in 3 of the last 4 games. Like, he's getting targets. He has touchdown equity both on the ground and through the air. Like, Minnesota's not a great defense. Samuel's going to come in by far the lowest owned, and Robbie Anderson's going to be moderately chalky. So pivoting off of him to Curtis Samuel is not a bad move at a much cheaper price tag with no one really going to play him.
Yeah. I'm trying to see if there's anybody else that's kind of worth talking or worth mentioning. Or shall we just we didn't talk about DeAndre Hopkins, tough matchup if you're a cornerback wide receiver guy, but for sure he can beat anybody, which, again, might lead to more Isabella in the slot, which I think is kind of sort of something interesting at 3K at DK. And I'm sort of going back and forth on my cash lineup if I'm pinching pennies. But I think, ideally, if I can get there, I want to get Cole at 3.6K on DK in my cash lineups. I'm okay with Chenault if I have to. But all right, let's move on. Let's talk about tight ends. And it feels like Well, Grant, you tell me. I think it's where you spend all the way up or you spend all the way down. No Irv Smith there from Minnesota. Kyle Rudolph specifically. Well, he's fine on FanDuel too, where it's tight, it's touchdown driven, and he's a guy that can, he's a red zone target, big boy. Obviously, he's got nice arms there as well. He gets those 180 catches in the end zone. Sometimes you can get yourself some Rudolph in your life. Of course, ideally, if you have all the salary cap in the world, like Kelsey and Waller are really well positioned today. What are you doing as far as tight ends?
Reed and Waller.
Well, we're not sure if Reed's playing yet. For the record, he's currently questionable.
Yeah, you can always swap off to someone else there. If Reed doesn't play, then you swap off Dwelly or whatever. Yeah, Dwelly.
Well, Higbee might not play, so then Ever could become interesting. He's basically the same price.
Yeah, you have multiple different ways to swap things around in the late game. I'm assuming that most people's lineups are going to have some exposure to the late game, but like you can swap all over the place. Like you can go up to Gronk, you can go up to Kelsey. Like just leave your flex and your tight end open. But I'm mostly just going to play Waller. Like he's going up against Atlanta. Atlanta's not great defensively. It's going to be a high-scoring game. It's going to be a lot of passing. They have a 28.25 team total. Tight end's trash. Just play Waller.
All right, Chief. You got to make our producer Devin happy. He wants you to talk about Evan Ingram. Are you excited about Evan Ingram? Or you can just talk about the Rudolph as a cheapie or the big boys. What do you want?
Yeah, I like Evan Ingram, man. Outside of, the last game, I mean, his target distribution had really been on an uptick. So I like him here. Going against Cincinnati, a game they should be able to move the ball fairly well. So I like Ingram. Another guy I like is Mike Gesicki. I'm going to have some exposure to him just because, I'm going to really have a whole ton of Fitzpatrick. But yeah, Ingram's definitely, I'm going to have about 15% if I'm not mistaken. But for me, I've only got a couple: Kelsey, Waller, Ingram, Gesicki, and Rudolph. Those are the only tight ends I'm playing today. I do think Rudolph has a little bit more upside in this spot than usual. I'm anticipating he's probably going to get 6 or 7 targets. Over the years, he's shown a knack to catch passes in the end zone. So he's a guy I will have some exposure to. With their passing attack a little bit depleted.
Hey, talk to me about this as far as lineup construction. Minnesota, we like Cook, we like Jefferson, we like Rudolph, all individually, right? But could you play all three in one lineup?
Cook, Rudolph, and Jefferson?
Oh, and Cook.
Yeah, I think it's possible just because of the salary distribution. If Jefferson – so here's the deal, especially on DraftKings. Jefferson could go for 10 catches, 130 yards, and no touchdowns and still be optimal, right? Kyle Rudolph could catch, 4 passes for 40 yards and a touchdown and be optimal. And then Dalvin Cook goes off for 150 and 2, and he's still optimal. So I think because of the pricing, I think you can definitely play all 3 of them.
Would you play Cousins then?
No. I don't feel like I have to play Kirk Cousins to win today. But, I do – I like those 3 pieces, and I will have some lineups with all 3 in there.
Grant, you got anything else to say as far as tight ends? Like you can throw Henry in a lineup if you want to do that, sure, by all means. I'm just having a hard time getting excited about many of the other tight ends. They're asking about the San Fran Rams game, which I think is getting mostly neglected today. It's one of those 4 o'clock games, and we think Mostert's going to come back and play for what it's worth, and Jordan Reed, we don't really know. I don't like messing with the Rams so much, especially their run game, but Kupp, especially on Yahoo, it's got a really good price. Specifically Yahoo, I like his price over there. Any thoughts as far as that game? Anything else as far as tight ends, or shall we hit up some defenses?
No, well, I mean, we're only going to talk about defense for like 30 seconds. But, yeah, I don't mind Kupp. Like, I'm staying away from the majority of the Niners offense, like pretty much just Reed or Dwelly, depending on if Reed plays. But, yeah, in defense, play the Saints.
Well, let's talk about that, because how do you accumulate fantasy points? You accumulate it by, pick sixes and sacks. And if Denver's just running the ball the whole game, which in theory they probably want to run the ball a good bit or run a wildcat or not throw the ball too much, you might subdue their scoring and they might only score like 7 or 10 points, whatever. You're not going to get the shutout necessarily. Maybe you do, but that's hard to bank on. How do you rack up fantasy points if you're not getting sacks or interceptions?
You don't, but what happens when you're down 15 points halfway through the second quarter? You're just going to run the rest of the game and just say, "Nah, we're good. We'll take the L." Probably not. They'll probably throw some stuff. Like if you're projecting Hinton for 12 throws, even, like he'll probably end up with 1 to 2 sacks and an interception.
What are you doing with that, Will?
I'm playing the Saints. And let me check. Like I said, I like to give the people the real deal. I don't like to hide anything from them. I've got the Saints. Huh?
I don't know. I'm just starting trouble.
I've got the Saints at 35%. I'm only playing 3 defenses this week. I've got the Saints at 35, the Giants at 30, and the Rams at 35. Those are the 3 defenses I'm playing this week. And I probably would have had the Steelers because I feel like the Steelers are probably the most opportunistic defense in the league. But they've got some COVID issues, so won't be playing them. But those are the 3 defenses I'm playing, and I'm just going to let the chips fall where they may.
If I can't afford stuff, if I run out of money, I'm willing to play the Jets at $3K on FanDuel. I'm willing to play them at like $2K on DK. Denver as well is super cheap. And again, I don't want to play these defenses, but if I like everything else and you embrace the variance and hopefully no defense scores 2 touchdowns, things like that. And also like the Cleveland. I know Cleveland's without the 2 best players, but it is Mike Glennon. So I guess Cleveland's playable too. Grant, give me a couple of your favorite stacks today.
There's not really a ton of QB stacks. Like my favorite stacks are going to be stacking up Allen or double stacking him, stacking up Mahomes or double stacking him, stacking up Fitzpatrick or double stacking him, stacking up Carr with Waller or Waller and Aguilar. Like those aren't really the stacks. Like the stacks that I'm looking into are mostly secondary stacks. Wilkins with Henry, like throwing in both the Jacksonville wide receivers because I don't need the quarterback there, and then spending up at running back. Bringing it back on with the Raiders with Ridley or with Hurst, which if I'm playing Waller, probably not going to be Hurst a ton. But like it's I don't have a ton of stacks. It's mostly like secondary correlations or those 4 main quarterbacks, which we know where we're stacking with.
How about yourself, Chief?
Yeah, man, kind of a similar scenario. And this is something I talk about on the Blitz. I don't like to leave things to chance when I want to get what I want. And yes, look, I've been using lineup HQ a lot. I got a lot of player groups, a lot of parameters. But when I want to stack up for the game, let's say Josh Allen, and I want to have some run backs, I'm going to try to get every combination possible. And this is something I talk about on the Blitz religiously. If you want to hit the nuts in terms of capturing the upside of the game, I'm going to take Josh Allen. I'm going to pair him with Diggs. I'll run Allen on the other side. Then I'm going to take Josh Allen. I'm going to pair him with Beasley. Then I'm going to run Allen on the other side. I'm going to take Josh Allen. I'm going to take Diggs. I'm going to take Beasley, 2, and then I'll run Allen. Then I'll run it back the same way, and I'll take a Gabriel Davis and a Beasley, and I do it with all the receivers. And that way, I'm not missing the random Mike Williams 6-catch, 150-yard, 2-touchdown game because I felt like Keenan Allen was the best play, which he is, but he's going to get most of the work. And then the same thing with Eckler now that he's back. A guy that should be fairly involved in the passing game. I don't want to overlook that either. So it does take a little time. It takes me probably, an hour to handle all those teams. But if you really want to, focus on stacking games, I feel like that's literally the best approach. And then I just go in the lineup HQ and build my other 100 without any effort. But if you want to get what you want, you need to focus and hone in and get it done exactly the way you want. And I did the same thing for the Chiefs game to make sure I've got, the receiver combinations that I want. And I'll do the same thing for the Miami game. And that's how you get it done. And, you don't miss out on opportunity. Even some of and I know we got to go, even some of the lower tier receivers, if you're stacking a game, you may want to get some Guyton in there in 1 or 2 lineups, because if he catches a 70-yard touchdown, as we've seen him do before, he could end up being optimal. So just, those are just some of the little tips when you're building to try and get what you want and still use lineup HQ to do the rest.
Yeah, they're going to be showing off lineup HQ. We're going to step aside in just a second, but the next show, it's going to be Tambo and Eric Beinford. They're going to be showing off the lineup HQ tools and show you all the functions you guys can have if you get the RG Premium. Of course, the link's going to go ahead and drop in chat for you guys. Hey, like and subscribe and smash and caress, whatever you do, that like button, whatever you do to turn the thumb up. We do appreciate that. $5 off as far as you click that link, $5 off your first month of Core 4, football, baseball, basketball, golf. Also, you can get yourself free RG Premium another way. How do you do that? You rock the RG badge. You finish in the top 10 of certain contests, and you get yourself, I think it's 1 month free, maybe 3 months free. Click the thing. It's going to be dropping in chat for you guys in a second. We'd like to give a shout out to added value. Shout out to those that are rocking the badge. We got Roja 99. We have Mark Klecker, and of course we have Grant's Burner, Cowardly Chicken. Grant, you have anything for us before we step aside and get out of here? Who's winning all the money today?
Wilkins goes with 20 plus. Hines and Hill go for less than 10.
You want to see that and raise it, Chief?
Let's go Devontae from Miami. 10 catches, 120 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Boom.
Stack him up with Fitzmagic.
All right. He was Chief Justice. He was Grant. I was Dean. This was football. Stay tuned. You got Tambo. You got STL Cards. You have Roth. You got Christy. And you have Eric Beinford. Thanks to Devin for producing. We're out of here. Good luck today. Holler.
Back at the Fantasy Bar, 6 of my favorite plays for week 12, including a stud running back I think is going to go overlooked. What high Vegas total game is being ignored? And of course, my favorite play of the week. Who is it? Belly up to the Fantasy Bar and find out. Welcome in, guys. Week 12 edition Beers Daily Fantasy 6-pack. Hope everybody out there had a great Thanksgiving. I know it was a little different this year, but hopefully you got some quality time with some family, friends, and of course some football. So hopefully you did well on that Thanksgiving slate, but we are here to talk the main slate on week 12, and I am back with 6 of my favorite plays covering both FanDuel and DraftKings. Guys, before we get into the plays for this week, as always, very simple request for you. Hit that thumbs up button. That's the tip jar here in the Fantasy Bar. I greatly appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel as well to get notified when these videos are coming out. All right, quick look back at week 11. Decent week. More green than red is what we're looking for. Deontay Johnson, very good to us here. And the running backs were usable. They got it done. But we move on to week 12. So let's start at that running back position. A guy I think is in an amazing spot that's going to go overlooked here. Kareem Hunt of the Browns. Now, look, no issue with Hunt or Nick Chubb. I think both guys can go off in this matchup with Jacksonville. We'll touch on that in a minute. But the thing that really stood out to me here is the pricing. There's a huge gap now between Chubb and Hunt, and I don't think that gap is really justified here. We have a $1,500 gap on DraftKings between these two, even bigger over on FanDuel. I think Hunt's the guy you want here, and I will have some Chubb, no doubt. But I'm going to have a lot more Kareem Hunt in my lineups here against Jacksonville. Look, a few reasons why. He's still out snapping Nick Chubb. I know Chubb was the productive one last week, is going to get it done on the ground, but Hunt's the guy more involved in the passing game, more involved in the red zone as well. They seem to love to go to him when they get around the goal line, even in a down game. He did find the end zone last week, and against this Jacksonville team, like we mentioned, 6th most fantasy points allowed per game to the running back position. Love both of these Cleveland running backs this week, but I'm going to save some money and roll with Kareem Hunt as a value play here against this awful Jacksonville defense. Now let's stay at the running back position. Let's go back to back here. I promised you a stud that's going to go overlooked. Many people are going to be rolling with Alvin Kamara of the Saints. Now we know Dalvin Cook pretty much a lock and load every single week. I mean, this guy continues to get favorable matchups. Love Dalvin Cook again this week. Too easy to put in the 6-pack here. But in that same pricing tier, in that stratosphere of running backs, I think Alvin Kamara really going to go overlooked here. Let's think about last week. We saw Taysom Hill make his debut as the starter, and things didn't go so well for Alvin Kamara. Only 1 target in that game. We know Taysom going to steal some rushing opportunities as well. All in all, public sentiment way down on Alvin Kamara here, and that's kind of factoring in to the ownership here. Looking like under 15% on Alvin Kamara this week. And anytime I get a guy like this at that kind of ownership, I'm going to take advantage. I expect these numbers to jump up. I expect him to be much more involved in the passing game. This is a game on the road I think can be competitive here with the Denver Broncos. And the Broncos have really struggled with running backs, especially of late. Over the last 4 weeks of the season, Denver bottom 3 in fantasy points allowed to the running back position here. So let's take advantage. There's plenty of value on this slate. I'm paying up this week. Alvin Kamara against the Denver Broncos. All right, speaking of value, let's save you some money at the wide receiver position with Nelson Aguilar of the Raiders. Now, I look at pricing here as well, and I'd say wide receiver 1 under 5K, and a lot of people are going to say he's not the wide receiver 1. That's Henry Ruggs. I disagree. Now, if you want to make an argument for Darren Waller as the pass catcher 1 on this team, that's fine, but we're talking about a Raiders team with a projected team total of over 28 points in this game against Atlanta. We're talking about a Falcons defense we know has been outstanding against the run here. So if you're thinking Josh Jacobs, I think the passing game is the way to go here. Very, very much a pass funnel is this Falcons defense. In fact, 2 wide receivers, 3rd most fantasy points allowed over the course of the season. We saw Aguilar play very well in that game against the Chiefs. I know he's an up and down, boom bust kind of guy, but indoors here in a great matchup with Atlanta, and you can't beat these prices. Nelson Aguilar, my favorite value at the wide receiver position. Now, we mentioned Darren Waller. That's exactly where we're going here next at the tight end position. Now, Aguilar won't have a ton of ownership. Waller probably going to be one of the more higher owned tight ends we have on this slate, and I have no problem eating that chalk, looking like Kelsey and Waller going to gobble up a lot of ownership here, but with good reason. I mean, let's look at the consistency here with this guy. If you're talking cash games, 5 or more receptions in almost every single game this season. So you're getting that floor there with those targets. You're also getting upside with Darren Waller. Why? We mentioned how bad Atlanta is against wide receivers. They're even worse against tight ends. In fact, allow the most fantasy points to that position in the entire NFL. So the old double stack, very, very valuable in these tournaments. A lot of people out there, the general public, do not utilize this. So don't be afraid to stack these Raiders. Super high team total here. Great matchup with Atlanta. Aguilar, Waller, the guys I want here against the Falcons. So we like that game. Let's go to the other side and run it back with wide receiver Calvin Ridley of the Falcons. So Julio Jones looks like he's going to be a game time decision, and this could go one of 2 ways. Either he doesn't play. That's great news for Calvin Ridley, obviously. Even if he does play, Julio Jones, one of those guys that does not perform well when he tries to play through injuries. So that's also good news for Calvin Ridley. So no matter how this plays out, I think Ridley going to be a big benefactor here. And the focus of this Atlanta attack, consistency, we talked about it with Darren Waller. This guy's only been under 14 DraftKings points twice this season. And in fact, 6 of his 9 games this season, he's gone for 18 or more. So again, nice floor in cash games, huge upside in tournaments. We've seen many games where Calvin Ridley's 30, approaching 40 fantasy points. In this game, for some reason, a lot of people don't seem to be on this game looking at ownership projections. Seems like Buffalo, Chargers is popping, Chiefs, Tampa Bay, a marquee game people are going after. But this game right up there total-wise, but ownership not reflecting that on most of these players, including Calvin Ridley. Now, if Julio Jones gets ruled out, maybe that ownership jumps up. I don't care. I love the spot here against the Raiders. Stack this game up. These are the pieces I want the most. Aguilar, Waller, and Calvin Ridley. All right, it's time to take a look at my favorite play for Week 12. But before we do that, guys, we're going to continue our Beast of the Week contest. Very easy. Get in the comment section. Make sure you've hit that thumbs up button. All you have to do is guess fantasy points. We'll go with FanDuel this week for my favorite play of the week. And the winner, closest guess, is going to get themselves 1 week of free Rotogrinders Premium. I said free, gives you access to everything we have, including Lineup HQ, gives you the ability to make a ton of lineups in a matter of moments, but a peek behind the curtain. Or if you're already a premium subscriber, hey, we'll send you a free Rotogrinders t-shirt. So let's wrap up Week 12 to look at my favorite play. You know, Matt's the Beast of the Week. All right, this time we owe you one more player. We owe you a quarterback here. I'm pretty sure you can guess who it is. We're going to complete that double stack with Derek Carr against the Falcons, this week's Beast of the Week. Now, clearly, I love this spot. We haven't had a double stack here in the 6-pack in quite some time, but that's how passionate and how much I love this spot for this Vegas passing game against the Atlanta Falcons. Now, let's take a look at Derek Carr. Again, been very consistent here. Multiple touchdown passes now in 7 of his last 9 games. Gives you a little bit of rushing upside. Not a ton, but he's not a zero in that department. That always helps. Vegas, huge team total. We continue to mention it. Only the Chiefs at Tampa Bay have a higher team total this week, and Vegas projected to score over 4 touchdowns in this game. And we mentioned how tough Atlanta's been on the run. You got to think Vegas going to attack through the air here. And we talked about the Falcons being bad against receivers, tight ends. You nailed it. You guessed it. No team has allowed more production to the quarterback position than the Atlanta Falcons. So we get low ownership here. We get a dream spot against a bad defense against the pass. Stack these Raiders up. Even if not, Derek Carr, playable in all formats. The price is fair. The matchup is there. Making Derek Carr easily my favorite play for Week 12 in this week's Beast of the Week. All right, guys, that'll wrap it up for week 12 with 6 of my favorite plays on FanDuel and DraftKings. As always, if you have any comments, questions, feedback, hit me up in the comment section right below the video. Don't forget, guess on fantasy points for Derek Carr on FanDuel for your shot at some free RG Premium. And don't forget, guys, hit that thumbs up button. Helps us out a lot, and I greatly appreciate it. Don't forget, you can also head over to Twitter and follow me at BeerMakersFan. For Rotogrinders.com, I am Beer saying salut. Guys, again, hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Good luck here in week 12, and we'll see you next week.
Hey, thanks for checking out our videos. If you want more expert advice on DraftKings, FanDuel, or any other daily fantasy sports, make sure you check out the current videos playlist.
What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka Toe Tag and Tambo, back for another edition of the Sunday Lineup HQ show with my man E. Bimefor. Eric, what's happening, man?
What's going on, man? Just trying to get everything figured out on this bizarre week. I was like doing content, you have Thanksgiving and then all this craziness for this week. I'm trying to wrap my head around everything yesterday as I'm writing my article. And then I feel like you never get like any sort of clarity until like right now, really. So not that I have like the golden ticket to the slate, but I couldn't. The slate is so bizarre. It was tough to figure out like in, a day or something. So I just been nibbling on it for the last 24 hours or whatever. And I think I have a little bit better grasp. I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, definitely excited to go through it. Everyone's already talked about it. The slate got flipped upside down. Some of the starting quarterbacks, if you want to talk about the names, are just really bad. So we'll go through that. I mean, I thought you might still be hung up on you mushed my Ravens, man. You wanted to have that Lamar take. You wanted that Hollywood Brown. That thing's all the way gone till Tuesday, and who knows if they even play it. But we're here to talk about Sunday, so we'll go into that. If it was, I'll say this, I like this slate, man. If it was Black Friday on Friday, if it's Cyber Monday tomorrow, today is Green Sunday. And today's the day we're getting the money because I like this slate quite a bit, man. So give me your brief overview. You said you sort of broke it down some. You know, what do you see in just grand landscape up front? And then we'll get into it by position and break it down with some of the chalk, leverage options, things we can do in these large field GPPs and whatnot. And then even, you know, single entry 3-max. A lot of cash game questions have been flying into the chat. So give me your grand overview here, Eric.
Yeah, it's a, like I said, bizarre slate in that, like you kind of outlined, we're gonna have a wide receiver playing quarterback on the team. You know, we already had Taysom playing quarterback, which that's like not even that's like not a non-story. That was, you know, the thing everybody talked about for a week, and now that's like nothing. He's like a normal news story. There's just so many guys out with injuries, guys out with COVID, teams with like COVID outbreaks. It has opened up tons of value. I mean, we've had slates this year where we're playing really, really, really sketchy value just to fit some guys. Like there's probably like 20 plus guys on this slate that would have been massive chalk on past slates, just because so much opportunity, you know, has opened up in both at every position too. You know, we have Fitzpatrick at quarterback. We have all these, you know, running backs, Brian Hill, Naheem Hines, et cetera, at running back. And then there's tons of wide receivers too. So I think the big thing that I was kind of pushing this week is our leverage points aren't quite as clear as like, you know, Justin Jefferson is chalk, so play Chad Beebe, right? Like you're not doing that. You know, those types of things aren't as clear. There are a couple, I think, but not a ton. So I think the big new, you know, kind of trend for me this week is kind of not getting caught up in all the same like late breaking news that everybody else is. You know, the Jonathan Taylor thing is obviously very, very huge, but it has bumped up one individual running back to be massive chalk. And I'm not sure that's deserving given all the options that are on this slate. So I just think, you know, taking a step back and having like a macro approach to this slate that is just like, okay, there's all these good plays. Which ones, you know, are just slightly lower projected, so the field is just like out on those guys, and then you know, combining that with a couple different little leverage points, I think is kind of the key to the slate. And they might be a little bit more gross plays than what the field is, you know, excited for. But I think that's kind of my general idea, just kind of taking a step back and assessing, like, you know, how strong are these guys that everybody is gravitating to because of late news.
Yeah, and I know what you're talking about. We are going to start there, actually. We're going to go to running back because I think that's the biggest conversation. It does lead to some other thoughts that I've got, and I'll get your thoughts on it. For those of you that don't have access to what we're looking at here, Lineup HQ, you're seeing it today. You're seeing it every Sunday here with us. But if you don't have access, producer Devin just dropped it in the chat. You can go and get yourself $5 off for the first month. Check it out. See all this stuff, right? Set your exposures. Use this tool. Get into the build settings. Build your groups, etc. as you go through it. But you mentioned, Eric, and you're talking about a one Naheem Hines who's jumped all the way to 36%. Look, you know, Jonathan Taylor's out, COVID hit, you know, you've got him there, you've got Wilkins, couple guys to talk about. The one thing I think stands out, so just, you know, two things, I guess, quick. Right away is Hines is all the way to the top. Where's Wilkins, right? We don't see him here because you've got another guy, Brian Hill, at the same price point who people are going to gravitate towards for likely a good reason. But again, it's not like he's a slam dunk for any reason. You don't know that. I think he's a good play. We don't know. I think Dalvin Cook is a good play at 9.5K, and we'll get to that in a second. But the other interesting factor I've got here is Cook at 9.5K, 35% owned. You flip over to wide receiver, far and away the most owned, Justin Jefferson. You flip over to tight end, and he's the fourth owned. He's only 10%, but it's because we'll get to that. We got two guys swallowing up 50% of the ownership almost. But you've got all these Minnesota guys, and then nobody's on Cousins, mind you. But I just want to know, one, you go ahead with your Naheem Hines thoughts, and then two, how you're handling this Cook/Minnesota situation as a whole.
Yeah, if we ignore the Hines thing is just like the macro kind of trend like I was talking about. If we ignore ownership, we ignore all the other context about this slate, all these other plays that are available, right? All these 3K wide receivers, all these other 4K running backs. We ignore all of them. I agree that I like Nyheim Hines. Clearly opportunity has opened up. The times that he has not, been able to have quality fantasy games is because Jonathan Taylor is on the field and particularly stealing pass work, which is just that backfield has just been so all over the place. So you remove, probably the biggest portion of that backfield. I get it. Nyheim Hines catches passes. He's cheap. The matchup is totally fine. He just happened to smash this matchup a few weeks ago. So like all the signs point to this guy. But I at 36% and God knows what, and that's like larger field stuff. You get into like the spy and get into even smaller, the juke, some of these contests that are smaller field. He gets higher, in my opinion, just due to the pass catching. And I just don't think that there's anywhere near that level of certainty about what happens in that backfield. Jordan Wilkins should step in as the, quote unquote early down grinder. The coaches have been on record as saying that backfield is like total hot hand scenario. Like the Hines game against the Titans, there's a quote after the game that Hines is going off, and the OC is talking to the running backs coach. He's like, you want me to get, JT in there or whatever? He's like, no, Hines is hot. Just leave him in. He's like they don't even know they don't know how they're going to use these running backs, even during the game. It's just kind of flying, they're playing it by ear. So there's no way that DFS players can be so certain that he's going to be not only the guy that's the guy for the Colts, but the guy that's the best play on this slate with tons of value. So like I get it, and if you want to play him in cash games, he has the pass catching floor, but there are so many options that I really just want to be getting away from the guys that we have like any questions about. You mentioned Dalvin, like other than price, there's not a single question about Dalvin Cook. So like I don't have an issue with that. But when you start to get into these guys that you're like is he even going to be on the field a lot? Like Nyheim Hines, like I just don't want to be on those guys as extremely popular guys. And I think there's pivots that have some uncertainty too, but they also have a ton of upside that no one's playing for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there with Hines. We talked a little bit about it on the Tourney Takes podcast this week with Killa B, Kirk Dees, myself, and it was a situation actually where they do, from what we understand, what we've seen and read and gone through, is that Indianapolis actually does schedule out its first like 20 plays of the game, and then from there they go with the hot hand approach. So when you see 36% versus 3%, that's pretty glaring, right? So that's one that definitely stood out to me. I think there's ways to use them. If you are going to use them as 36% owned, be cognizant of that. I think, one good play that you could use opposite. I'm always looking for these secondary stacks. I'm pretty sure there's almost Corey Davis, 5%. I kind of like him on the other side of that game. So I like that secondary stack. And then to be different and unique, I also like going the opposite way. So sometimes I'll go an opposite defense or an opposite quarterback that everybody's on. And if everyone's on Hines and no one's really on Derrick Henry down here at 13%, they're, one of their run stuffers is out for Indianapolis. I can go with Derrick Henry at 7,900 and then use a guy like Pittman or my guy, T.Y. Hilton, who I'll talk about later this week, and get another little mini stack, but you're just flipping the board a little bit and you're getting a unique lineup construction, because there's definitely enough value on the slate when we get to wide receiver to still build in with a guy like Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook. And we're not going full team jam them in. Maybe you get a cheaper, wide receiver or running back in that flex spot. But I do like that for starting some lineups. I should note also, guys, couple things. Julio Jones officially inactive. So for those of you that are looking at, different plays, and when we get to wide receiver, this will be probably a larger conversation. But with that said, we already knew this one, and we can go here and then talk about this one, maybe, Eric, and then some other guys you mentioned as possible pivots in there, what else you're doing at running back. But Brian Hill, 4K, 23% owned. Thoughts on him? And then other guys you mentioned, there's a lot of other guys you can use now in this range, and you can go through Chubb and all the other ones that you want to mention. But yeah, talk to me about Brian Hill first and then run it out from there.
So I first have to shout out Brian Hill because he's from where I'm from. So okay. I cannot speak ill of Brian Hill because he represents where I'm from. But he's also the all-time leading rusher at Wyoming and played with Josh Allen. So you can get a little extra narrative street. If you play a Josh Allen, Brian Hill team, you get the all Wyoming stack. So being silly aside, I do have concerns with Brian Hill. The one positive I think that we've seen kind of trend, especially with the JT news and Nyheim Hines stuff and all these receivers opening up, is that, a few days ago we would have said, oh my God, Brian Hill's going to be like 70% owned. If all this other stuff didn't happen. You have a 4K running back against the Raiders. The Falcons' ground game hasn't been super successful, but long term, Devonta Freeman was successful, Tevin was successful, even Gurley is having good fantasy games, even as dust as he is. So the position is valuable. My issue is that we've done this dance before. we've done this Falcons, guy is out before, and it is never as clear cut as we want it to be as DFS players. Ito Smith and Quadri Allison, assuming they're both in, are gonna play. Like, we don't have to like it or agree with it, but they're gonna play. I have no idea how much. And Brian Hill is the most talented and most explosive of that backfield. But so it's a little bit similar to the Nyheim Hines thing, except I feel a lot more certain about Brian Hill gets the first crack, right, at being the guy. But they haven't thrown to their backs a ton this year. They haven't been successful running at all. The Raiders are like a bad defense that's really gross to play DFS plays against, as odd as that sounds, because on offense, they just want to control the clock and grind the game. Derek Carr runs the play clock down to 1 every single time. They're trying to run the ball. They shorten games. They don't make any big plays on offense. Julio Jones being out also really matters to these Falcons guys. When we've seen historically, when Julio is out, that offense is garbage. Calvin Ridley is a good player, but you can't run everything through Calvin Ridley. And I like Brian Hill, and you can't run everything through him. So I'm just a lot lower on the Falcons offense in general and that game environment in general without Julio Jones. So, as much as I like Brian Hill, the one thing I do like is that the ownership has gone down a little bit with Hines. So he's more in play for me, but I'm probably still lower in general than the field on Brian Hill. Can I give my one pivot while we're on these 4K?
Oh, absolutely.
So kind of why I'm off of these guys is two things. Like you mentioned, I think you can flip the build with all the wide receiver value that you have. Play Dalvin, like if you like Henry, Chubb, Jacobs, Eckler's maybe in play now, Robinson. There's all these a little bit more expensive backs that we would have loved on a normal slate, and we have the wide receiver value to play them. So I really like kind of flipping that build and getting away from the punt running backs. But the guy that I'm probably going to play in my main team, which I think is way off the board, is Matt Breida. So Matt Breida is a similar situation to me. When I take a step back and I say, okay, on a normal slate, if all the Dolphins running backs were out and all they have is Patrick Laird and DeAndre Washington behind Matt Breida, like Matt Breida, we thought was going to be the man coming in to this year. Obviously, that has not been a thing. But Dolphins running backs have been very, very useful in fantasy. Myles Gaskin was awesome. Like his role was awesome, especially once they got rid of Jordan Howard. And then we saw Salvin Ahmed be awesome for that team. The offense, in my opinion, is elevated with Ryan Fitzpatrick in there, and they play the Jets. I know the Jets' pass defense is a little worse than the run defense, but I don't think it matters. I think, just Fitz bringing up that offense, their running backs catch passes. I can't say for certain that Breida's even going to play much. So that is why I get people are concerned, right? It's concerning because we don't really have any clarity in that backfield. But I think he has as much, if not more, upside than all these other guys in a game that they should dominate the worst team in the NFL. He can catch passes. He's an explosive football player. So he could play 10 snaps for all I know. But I'm willing to kind of bet on his upside at no ownership compared to these other 4K running backs as massive chalk.
Yeah, I just was gonna say I don't hate that at all, actually, and I think it's some of the jokes throughout the week on Twitter and whatnot, where whoever gets these Miami Dolphins running backs correct could take down the slate. So with Fitzpatrick becoming a little bit more popular, and we're gonna get to quarterback here eventually. That would be a good spot as well. I think Miami defense was one that would normally be popular when people are paying up, but now because we've got this Saints situation, which we normally don't talk a lot about defense, but we will mention it here a little bit at the end. But yeah, one note is Quadri Olson. He was a little bit sick, I think, at Friday at practice. He ended up actually being inactive, so it does help the Hill situation a little bit, but like you said, there's still a guy like Ito Smith there. I think Tony Brooks James is the other guy. So there's a couple guys in behind, but like you said, and how I feel the same actually, is I like Hill's chances because he's going to get the first crack. Obviously it's a 50-50, does or he doesn't, but just like anybody else. but I do like his opportunity for starters versus a 10-1 ownership swing on what we're seeing with Hines versus Wilkins, where we don't even know how they got their first 20 plays scripted. There could be 20 Wilkins plays. He comes out hot and they decide to talk to the running backs coach, says, just stick with him. He's hot. And then boom, all that 36% is gone. So I definitely don't hate that. You mentioned a bunch of the other guys in the middle. I like James Robinson this week. I'm, sad to see the ownership get up to where it has. I think, the other side is more intriguing to me at this point a little bit. And you had Chubb tagged up there. I kind of like Hunt, but sell me on Chubb over Hunt first. Go for that, because to me it's about the price. But let's hear your side.
Yeah. I think you can definitely play both. I see a legitimately realistic scenario where they both run for 100 yards and they both score like 20 plus fantasy points. I think that the matchup is about as good as you can get. The Jaguars defense has been horrid all year, but now they're just like banged up. They're missing like tons of starters, including their best defensive lineman. The matchup is just as good as it gets, and I'm not sure that people quite understand how good this Browns running game is. Like, we love Derrick Henry and like the Titans running game, but Derrick Henry, he pops a few big runs, and like almost it seems like every game, and then he gets a ton of 2 and 3 yard carries, because he just grinds it out with 30 touches. That is not really how the Browns running game is. I know that Hunt kind of busted a couple games as chalk, so it's kind of had people off, but Wyatt Teller, as one of their offensive linemen, is back. I think he might be their best run blocking offensive lineman, and they've just been road grading people since he came back, especially. And Chubb, in my opinion, is one of the best pure runners, if not the best pure runner in the NFL. So you get just this pristine matchup where people are worried about that split, and I get it, but I think Chubb, working his way backward in what definitely should be a positive game script, and maybe the best matchup in the league, he can be the Derrick Henry that we see sometimes, right? The 7K 8K Derrick Henry that gets 25 touches and breaks 2 70-yard touchdowns and has 3 scores. You need that to like win a tournament, and that's the concern. But like I'm not sure there's a greater lock for like 100 yards than Chubb today. And if, it's basically a split, right? A 50-50 split. But if things trend towards Chubb, which I do believe that they want it to be, maybe more 60-40 Chubb, as he starts to get healthier. Chubb has as much upside, I think, as any running back on this slate, sans Dalvin, probably. No one is playing him. He also makes a way, if you do want to play the chalky Brown, one of the chalkier defenses, if you want to play the Browns, you can add that correlation in, and I think it makes sense. Or you can play him and get a little bit fancy with a secondary correlation, and that can bust the Browns defense. So I just think he's a very useful play that won't be owned, given his kind of price right in the middle, and like you can't get some of the wide receivers that everybody wants to play, and so I'm just betting on Chubb's upside today.
Yeah, I like it. I like what you said. A couple things. One is that I'm glad you brought it up. You can definitely use both of them. I've got some lineups with both of them and the Cleveland defense all together. Again, they're going up against Jacksonville. So I think against against Glennon, it's going to be a spot where you can use both of those guys. And if the defense gets after him, you could easily see it. They are splitting carries like you just talked about. The interesting part for me was just the savings on Hunt. The fact that he's not even getting 10% still, even with what looks like value there, and the red zone touches. It was like 8-0 last week. So for whatever reason, you'd think of it as Chubb, but I love your comparison there. Chubb is basically a cheaper Derrick Henry in a better spot. So I definitely don't hate that. Like you said, it makes more sense there. A couple other guys, and then we'll segue over just in the spirit of time. But Wayne Gallman, for me, very surprised as well. 8% doesn't seem right. I thought he'd be more. This is a great matchup. One of the bigger team totals the Giants have had. I think it's a good spot to get on someone like him at just 5K. And he pairs well with, talk about going against one of these other, random backup quarterbacks, going up against Brandon Allen, these Giants, and they've been putting up points. And at 3,200, I didn't look at defense ownership yet here. They got to be up there, but 10%, they're half of what the Browns are as what we're seeing on here on Lineup HQ. So definitely like those two paired together. I think that's a good combination. You mentioned Breda. The only other guy that I would mention here is James White. I saw some people mention it in the chat. I definitely think that's interesting, and I definitely think he makes for some really good secondary correlations, whether you want to use Chris Kirk because you think, Hopkins is going to be locked up like he seemingly always is when, basically any number one that plays New England gets locked up. His numbers have shown that about 8 to 10 times he's played against Belichick, and Belichick has tied him up quite well, to be honest. So it does make some sense to get a little secondary in there with James White, Christian Kirk, or I always call him that, or James White and Andy Isabella, who will get to in the spirit of time. I don't know if there's anyone else you want to, by all means, but we'll move over to quarterback and try and tighten it up here a little bit with time and mention some of the stacks and utilize some of these wide receiver options so we can save time at the end for more questions. But talk to me about quarterback, because if we look at ownership, it's pretty obvious everyone's just paying up this week, right? So if you talk about overall lineup construction, what it looks like, you can see people are going to Josh Allen, they're going to Patrick Mahomes. It's going to lead to things like Kelsey when we get there later with Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, all those situations. What are you doing with quarterback this week? And then what are your thoughts about these guys being at the top as far as ownership is concerned?
I think it's interesting. I think Mahomes is the guy that's just continued to pick up steam. Early in the week we had him down lower. It's kind of like the inverse of Gallman. I like that you brought up Gallman, because he, at the beginning of the week, he was like the second. We had him, it was early, but we had him like the second highest owned running back, which just shows you how strong of a play that he is. But now, given all that news, things have changed. Well, now we have the inverse at quarterback, where Patrick Mahomes was like, okay, he's 8K. We don't have all this value, and Josh Allen projects just slightly better point per dollar. So Allen comes in. Well, Mahomes has just picked up steam as you have infinite funds, right? If you want to play Patrick Mahomes, it's really not difficult. So I think it's even quite possible that Mahomes passes Josh Allen, which makes tournaments a little bit more interesting, because now you get, maybe, Josh Allen's not going to be unowned, but I think everyone might be kind of leveling themselves here with those two games. So, my coming in take when Mahomes is like the fourth or fifth highest owned quarterback, I was like, oh my God, we have the best quarterback on the planet. And that's what's actually a pretty good matchup. We got to jam him in. But now it's tough for me. There's three quarterbacks, maybe four if you include Fitz. I'm a little lower on Fitz, I think, maybe than the general public is. But there's those top two are definitely the best quarterbacks to me. So I'm totally fine playing a quarterback that's like decently owned. Maybe that's a contrarian take, as long as you're thoughtful about, like, if I'm playing Breida, right? Like if I'm playing Breida, or you're playing both the Browns running backs in a team, like who gives a shit who you play at quarterback? So I think that's the most important part about quarterback. But the most interesting thing that's really popped up to me is Justin Herbert. So we have what we thought was going to be the most popular game of the week all week, and I get seems maybe a little bit overpriced, but I don't think that's true. I think he deserves to be right up there with every other quarterback. And so if Mahomes ends up being that guy that picks up all this steam, now you have the Josh Allen then taking all that ownership that Mahomes doesn't get, and Herbert is just as good of a play. I mean, look at like the game logs. Look at whatever you want to look at.
I hate to be a game log watcher, but just look at that game log. It's a lot nicer than looking at the pimples on his face. I can tell you that much.
Or his new haircut. Yeah.
Or his new haircut. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Brendan Dassey at quarterback. That makes me sick to play that. But his floor is unreal. He has more rushing upside than I think people give him credit for. And they're clearly going to have to score points. They get Austin Eckler back, which I think, they lose Kalen Ballage and they bring Austin Eckler back. Like, that just makes the offense better. It also makes the passing game better. So like Herbert's kind of the guy that I wasn't all that into coming into the week, but now you just see this guy in, the best or second best game of the week with what Keenan is the best wide receiver play, or one of the best wide receiver plays, with great weapons. And now no one is playing him because of all this like steam on Mahomes.
Yeah, I like that call. I just wanted to flip over real quick. 20% on that. One of the questions in the chat that was just brought up, just if you want to elaborate further on that call, Eckler's back. You mentioned that. Definitely think that makes it stronger. He was on like Twitch streams talking about how he's ready, and he really, he said he like literally tried to hurt himself and he couldn't. So he's like, I was just testing it so hard that I wanted to see where it would get to. And he's like, I couldn't make it hurt is the wording that he used. So what are your thoughts on that? And like, how do you stack up Herbert here? How would you do that in something like a single entry where, like you said, this looks to be good? It's one of my favorite things to do. Talked about it just earlier, even on here, the opposite side, right? You've got Josh Allen with all the ownership at 14%. you can get the quarterback in the same game environment. You go to Mahomes, 11%. You can drop down to Brady at 4%. We'll get there in a second. My love is not for Brady, but I do like the Herbert call. So how are you pairing them up, and what's your sort of thoughts on that as you mix them into your lineups?
Yeah, I think that's another perk of Herbert is that you need to, in my opinion, double stack him in tournaments, but that instantly makes you like you can play Keenan Allen, a more popular wide receiver, and have a very unique lineup without really having to work too hard, just by playing Justin Herbert and like another Charger. And I think there's two, maybe three. I'm not super into Mike Williams, just given kind of the slate context. But going back to Eckler, I actually think you can play Eckler with Herbert. I think Eckler's best skill set is of a wide receiver. I think Josh Kelly is like in the doghouse. They're not too high on Josh Kelly. The other running back that I think they'll use today is Tremaine Pope, who is also not really a runner. He's a receiver. Last week, we saw them just open up the offense. They went full Bills last week. They just said, we're not running. Justin Herbert lead us to the promised land. They threw it 50 times and they were winning by like 2 or 3 scores the whole game. Like that's exactly what I want to see out of my quarterback. So I think you can play Eckler, and I think Eckler has 8 catch upside. He's probably not going to get a ton of carries, and they're not going to unleash him into like a bell cow role. But he could have 100 yards receiving, which is like unheard of out of our running backs. And if you sneak a goal line touchdown or something, I think Eckler is actually a pretty strong running back play that we didn't get to. So I'm glad we're touching on him, and I think you can pair him with Herbert. And then the other pairing option, Keenan is just obvious, right? He's like the alpha of all alphas. We don't need to elaborate too much on Keenan, but I think Hunter Henry is actually really interesting. He hasn't exploded in any game this week, but his usage has been, right underneath the Kittle, Kelsey, Waller tier. He's been right there with all those guys. He never leaves the field. He gets red zone targets. He gets end zone targets. He gets air yards for a tight end, and he's really good. The matchup is also like the best on the board, for a tight end, maybe in a game that we expect to shoot out. So, I'm not super big into like kind of these trends and stuff, but some smart people will talk about like the best correlation you want from your tight end. Like it's not target share, it's not air yards, whatever. It's basically like a scoring environment, right? Like team total. So if we expect the Chargers are going to score a bunch and Herbert's going to throw 4 or 5 touchdowns, Hunter Henry could, be the highest scoring tight end on the slate. So, and he's like, it's hard to get like unique at positions like tight end this week because you have a couple of just really standout plays. But Henry in Herbert stacks, I think, is a really, really like sharp way to do it.
Yeah, I definitely love that. And you also got to think too, we talk about this a lot. I know you do. I had Blender on here last week. You guys do a great podcast together. For those that haven't checked it out, the Theory of DFS podcast. So, you guys talk about this all the time. And I think one of the things that pops to me is that instantly people just go, oh, if Keenan Allen's going to be chalk, I just flipped to Mike Williams. But that's if everyone's doing this now, you have to go to that next level. And like you said, you look using lineup HQ, you can see it right here. Ownership only 8%. Floor is nothing to frown at. But look at the ceiling here, right? He's got one of the better ceilings at a 4.8K at only 8% ownership. You go back over here. Here's Eckler, 10%, and then you go back to Herbert, and they're in the same environment that Allen and Diggs, these guys that are like 40% combined or 35% combined owned. You can get that whole stack for less than that with 3 guys and then run it back. If you want to use Diggs, by all means, you've already flipped the script on a little bit where most will have him with Allen, or then you could start dropping down to a guy like Gabriel Davis, who we'll get to wide receivers here in a minute. But a couple other guys I want to mention. So one that's seemingly gone overlooked to me, there's a lot of like, as Blender would say, vomit stacks you could do. You could try some of these, Glennon stacks. I've got some for sure with Cole and Chenault because I just like those guys, and they really don't have anybody there. And plus, now that I saw the ownership get up a little bit higher on Robinson, I don't mind flipping some of that ownership that way. We like those running backs on the other side, like Chubb, like Hunt. So I think it's very viable to go somewhere like that. But for me, the game that's going a little bit overlooked is this Atlanta Vegas Raiders game, right? You've got Ryan only showing up here. He's got a little bit more at 10%, but Derek Carr is at 2.8% down here. But yet Waller is going to be popular. We've had Aguilar going off for touchdowns week in, week out. We've got guys that you can use them with. And now there is viable options you can run it back with, whether it's Hill, who's the most obvious chalk that we talked about at running back. You can use Ridley. You can use Olamide, whatever his name is, Zacchaeus, or whatever his name is, Zacchaeus, I should say. But, just going here with that game, any thoughts on that game or other quarterbacks here that you wanted to talk about? I've got a couple more, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think the Vegas game. So when I do a kind of a tournament breakdown article every week where I kind of try to start like we did, right? Start like at this macro perspective and just kind of walk through the slate, and I get into the game environments I think that are the most enticing. And this week I actually only put 3. Usually there's more. The obvious Chargers, Bills, Chiefs, Bucks, and then the third one was Vegas and Atlanta. I think people are going to, like you said, Waller. People are going to Brian Hill. Maybe a little bit of Jacobs, and I guess maybe a little bit of Ridley now, although I'm not totally bought in that people will play him over some of these other guys. But point being that there's some guys catching ownership, but nobody like catching a ton outside of, I guess, maybe Waller. And these are 2 of the worst defenses on the slate. Julio being out is both a blessing and a curse, right? It opens things up for Ridley, for Zacchaeus, for Gage, for Hurst, and maybe Brian Hill, but it hurts the offense quite a bit. So, there's a little give and take there. The Vegas side, like you said, it's just a situation where outside of Waller, people are like uncomfortable, kind of. The one thing I'll say with Jacobs is Jalen Richard is out. So it's not like, he's like a big deal, but it is a guy who, like, if the game script just goes to shit, they still might use Jacobs, even though I know they have Booker, but they still might keep Jacobs out there with Richard out. But I think that game is interesting. I'm probably going to be ignoring it because I'm just so like if Julio was in, Julio might have been like not super popular at 6,500 against the horrible defense.
I know.
And that was really exciting to me. But with Julio out, I think it makes it a little bit tougher. But that's another reason why no one's going to play this. And like you said, Derek Carr, we don't have to like him, but like the guy just keeps getting it done. He's playing really well in real life, and he has a little more fantasy upside than people think. So I do like that game. I'm probably not going to play it myself, but that's probably just like a little bit of bias for me.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing I love about Lineup HQ is it's got all the numbers right here. And look at that team total, and then look at the ownership. Like, when do we ever get this or see it? It just makes no sense to me. And it's just the way the slate is going. And I think it's not a problem of, but it's a result of so much value in these other positions that everyone's just automatically looking at it like, well, if I can fit Mahomes and Josh Allen, then why wouldn't I? But there's so many other ways that you can build, right? So I think that's the other thing too. You have to be a little bit uncomfortable, be comfortable being uncomfortable. You've talked about this in the past, right? That's a key saying that you use. I think that's so true. And I think the fact of the matter is right here is people are just getting too comfortable, and it shows within the ownership where, look, I love Mahomes. We both got him tagged up here. Trust me, I got Mahomes lineups. But it's hard to find a Mahomes. I mean, there's lots out there. Don't get me wrong. There's lots of permutations you can do, but there's a lot of lineups that you make with Mahomes where it looks like everyone's going to have this lineup, or it just feels like it's coming together that way, where you kind of, again, have to take another step and try and go a little bit off the board with it. But at the same time, there is some guys up the gut here that you can use. Daniel Jones, Teddy Bridgewater. The boys talked about this on Attorney Takes Pod. The revenge factor coming back to Minnesota. There's a spot here for sure. We're going to get into the wide receiver in a second with, Samuel, Anderson, Moore. We already like Cook in that game. Jefferson, like a lot of people are going to this game, but 3% on him. No ownership on Cousins. Not saying these guys are great plays, but they're a lot better than if some of the guys in the chat hating on the Glennons and the Allens, and I get it, and that's why. But I'm just saying, just to leave these guys off is a little bit crazy to me. So I'll definitely have some of those. We still got over 20 minutes. Eric, we got time. We're not going to spend a lot on defense. We'll get to the New Orleans Saints take, but yeah, talk to me about this, because this one always interests me. We've had some chats on this in the past. I know that it was brought up when Zeke and Cooper back, when Dak was still playing, and it's one of those weeks where, everyone's going to be on Cook. So the natural situation is, if everyone's going to be on Cook, I'll go to Jefferson, but then they're both like 30 or 35% owned. So how are you handling this? Are you setting up any rules? Are you making sure there's one or the other? Like, what's your thoughts on using those guys in a lineup together, maybe?
Yeah, the Viking situation is kind of tricky. I think in terms of using them together, I think it's interesting mostly from a game stack perspective, because I do like I'm a smidge worried about Teddy, just being healthy. He looked pretty awful when he got hurt, and then obviously missed a week. But I think it's safe to, I'm probably just being overly cautious about it. But like their wide receivers every single week, right? We see their wide receivers pop off. They've been chalk tons, whether it's DJ Moore or Robbie Anderson. Curtis Samuel is like now a thing as Mike Davis has kind of fallen back. They have 3 like legit awesome weapons that are clearly high upside in a good matchup, that allows you to play like Teddy, DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, Justin Jefferson, and Dalvin Cook. Now you're getting these awesome Vikings plays, that are more popular, and you have no concerns for ownership, and they're correlated together. If Teddy and Cruz start scoring, the Vikings guys are gonna push the pace a little bit more, or vice versa. So that's how I would approach, in my opinion, playing them together. But as a whole, I don't want to say worried about the Vikings, because it's not the same thing. But like with Julio, so Adam Thielen is out, right? That's a big reason why. I mean, not why Dalvin's chalk, but why Jefferson and Rudolph are popping up. But a lot of times what we see, and I wrote this in my article this week, people treat the NFL too much like the NBA, where, okay, X starting point guard is out, insert, Kemba Walker is out, insert Brad Wanamaker, right? Or Marcus Smart or whatever, because, they're free, and yes, they're going to play 30 minutes and whatever. And it does work in the NBA most of the time. Football doesn't really work like that. Like, you don't just remove Adam Thielen and get either Olabisi Johnson getting all of his work, or you don't just like take 8 targets from Thielen and give them to Jefferson. There's more nuance to it than that. And what happens a lot of the time that people also don't factor in, more than just the volume, is the offense cratering. So I don't expect the Vikings offense to crater in this spot. They still have Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson, but I do think that, removing one of the best wide receivers in the NFL from an offense is not something that we should just scoff at and say, oh yeah, now I got to jam Justin Jefferson because he's going to pick up a couple more targets. The offense could just be a little bit worse. So it's actually a week where I'm not jamming any Vikings in, and I'm not stacking that game personally. I do like it if you're going to approach it that way. So, and I don't really play like one-off wide receivers. So Justin Jefferson's not really in my pool, but I do still like Dalvin. Like, I think it's very conceivable that without Thielen, that they just, all right, Dalvin,
continue to do what they do and just roll it even further. Exactly.
Yeah. And then now you get, instead of 30 carries, you get 35 carries and 6 targets. And so I do still like Dalvin, and kind of like we talked about earlier, Dalvin certainly isn't low owned, but I do think as the week has gone on, you see like Mahomes ownership's going up. You see Tyreek's ownership's going up, Kelsey's ownership going up, Diggs and Keenan are still popular, and all these 4K running backs are popping up. I think that Dalvin's ownership is going to be like in check. It's not low, but it's like in check. So that's kind of where I side. I side more Dalvin, and just a little bit lower Vikings in general.
Yeah, I'm with you there, and I'm glad you brought it up, the point that you made there. I like using them together with my Teddy lineups. So I'll go Teddy and a couple of pass catchers, and then use like Cook, Jefferson, and then at least if it happens where they go off, I like the Teddy side better. He should be tossing. There's a lot of guys you can use within him. So, and then I definitely like, as the one, if I'm doing a one-off from Minnesota, it's most definitely going to be Dalvin Cook, and just eat the chalk and not worry about it. And then there's guys you can use on the other side that are lesser owned, and we'll get to that right now. If you just want to start with these price ranges, DJ Moore 8%, Robbie Anderson trending upward almost 13%, but then you go down to a guy like Curtis Samuel, 5%. He's $1,000 cheaper than Robbie Anderson, and he's got like 3 20-point games in his last 4. So you look at something like that and you just say, to me, that's a fine one-off. He's not expensive enough that it matters, where I can get that even as a secondary stack, where I can say, look, I'm just going to pick up a piece of this game, and then I'm going to get different elsewhere within it. So in these price ranges here, anyone that stands out that you absolutely want to talk about, there's guys with less ownership up here. Tyreek's got, squeezed between Allen and Diggs, who we know are going to be the most popular. And then you've got, Michael Thomas with Taysom, only, 5.8%. Calvin Ridley, obviously getting that late bump with the Julio news, and then a bunch of guys that are just under-owned down below. So who do you want to talk about here in this top range?
Well, not that I want to play him, but it's really hilarious that Taysom becoming the quarterback is what unlocked Michael Thomas. Drew Brees can't get him going. But so I think there's two, maybe you can call it 3 things at wide receiver that I think are like really, really strong this week. At the top, to me, it's way more about like what you're stacking. Let's call it 6K on up, is way more about like, okay, what quarterback are you playing, or what what game are you stacking or whatever, right? If I'm playing Josh Allen or Justin Herbert and I'm paying up for a wide receiver, I want to be looking at Keenan Allen and Stephon Diggs. If I'm playing Mahomes or Brady, I know we didn't get into Brady, but I think he's a similar concept to Herbert, right? The inverse of the popular game. Like if I'm playing those guys, I want to be playing Tyreek, and I really like Godwin this week, Mike Evans, whatever, and DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson, like you said. But what I think is maybe the most interesting kind of tournament strategy of this week is along your Curtis Samuel point. So Curtis Samuel can be a bring back to just Dalvin Cook as a secondary correlation, and he has a lot more upside than I think people give him credit for. He scored 30 fantasy points 3 weeks ago against the Chiefs. He's getting rushing work, and not just like a end around. He's lining up in the backfield and getting carries. He's getting carries at the goal line. And he has 10 target upside in this offense. I'm a little biased because he was a guy that I was really bullish on in this Joe Brady offense coming into the year, and he didn't do it for so long. And now I'm starting to see it, that you're like getting excited. But I think Curtis Samuel is like you said, a 2% tournament play that you can play in a game stack, or you can play as a secondary correlation with Dalvin, that nobody's playing. And not only is nobody playing because of just like projection, but this middle tier, which is like my kind of second point, is this middle tier is totally over. Nobody's playing 5K wide receivers, and if they are, it's maybe like Devontae Parker, and he's closer to 6K. Like no one is. I think Antonio Brown, I guess, is probably going to pick up some steam with the Chiefs picking up steam. That's kind of what we see, is like, okay, Mahomes picks up steam, so I need to bring back from the Bucks, and I think AD picks up steam, which is also partly why I like Godwin. But
we know you're a Godwin truther as well, so we can't forget that. But I actually do like that quite a bit this week at 5%. I know Evans is at 2%. That's pretty low as well. So there's definitely ways you can go different there. You mentioned the Joe Brady stuff was always a big deal for me, and then with CMC being out, it's actually been a lot more to him. Like they started with Mike Davis, but it just hasn't progressed, right? Even lately, he kept getting starts and spot starts, with CMC continuously being out, and it's still going to Samuel. So it's clear there's something there. I definitely like that for him being so low owned. Even like DJ Moore there as well. Robbie Anderson, Robbie Anderson's ownership's got up there a bit, but I think, he's similar to me. I always talk about this year, but how John Brown last year, everyone thought of him just as this deep threat for Josh Allen, but we've seen John Brown actually make a difference. And that actually kind of worries me a little bit on Stephon Diggs. Just, circling back to this top here for a second, couple things about it is one, no, John Brown hasn't been the best for Stephon Diggs or for Josh Allen. So that worries me a little bit as having them as chalk. And then the obvious that everyone's just putting Allen and Diggs together. So I'm trying to separate those guys in my lineups as much as possible. I have the odd one-off with them together or something, but I am trying to separate them, or maybe use Allen in my lineups with Diggs if I'm using Herbert, because then I know if you go Allen, Diggs, Allen, you're pretty much going with the same build that almost everybody's going with. So you'd have to swing in a Herbert, maybe swing in an Eckler and do something like that, or a Henry, right? And then you can get a little bit different there. So I don't mind that. I do like, and I think this ownership could flip here between Brown and Woods. I've been on Woods all week. I like him. One of the things that stood out to me, it was in Showdown last week when I first noticed it. And obviously you see Kupp come out of the gate in Showdown last week with, what was it, almost 100 yards in the first drive, or in the first quarter. It was like 78 yards in the first quarter. And I'm like, I picked the wrong guy. I faded the Kupp chalk just to try and get different, because what I saw with Woods was not only if you took away that 20 target game, they had almost the same targets, and you can't just throw a game in the garbage, but I'm saying that's an outlier for sure. They had almost the same targets, but they use Woods on end arounds. They use them in the red zone to rush with. They do some different things with them. So here you get the price difference. It looks like that's already being baked into the ownership though. So again, another little bit of a disappointment as the week has gone on. But like you mentioned, with that, the Mahomes team there, I do think more people are going with Antonio Brown at this price point, and then fitting it in with whether it's Tyreek Hill or Kelsey on the other side. Let's move it down here, though. We don't have much time left, still about 12, 13 minutes left. Some people talk about Michael Pittman. I mentioned him. I like T.Y. Hilton, who's 3,900. We'll get down there in the value guys, but talk to me about just the rest of this lower 5K and then 4K range. Anybody you got in here?
Yeah, I think it's just a good range. Samuel, Pittman, those guys make for good either secondary correlations or leverage. You know, Pittman provides some pretty strong leverage on a slate that doesn't, or TY, your guy TY, they provide some pretty strong leverage on a slate that doesn't have many like leverage, like pure leverage points on the same team. But the big trend to me is just this tier is totally unowned. So if, you know, I'm not saying like go in here and just click one of these guys into your lineup, you know, to be like thoughtful about how you do it, right? Like Curtis Samuel with Dalvin Cook makes a lot of sense. You know, using Mike Williams, who I'm not super high on necessarily, but using Mike Williams, you know, in a stack, say with Keenan Allen, you know, use a stack, you know, Herbert, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, and Gabriel Davis is you're stacking the chalky game in a very, very different way than the, you know, leaving off Diggs and using Herbert over Allen. So doing stuff like that, I think is really strong this week. I tagged Sammy Watkins. He's probably my guy in this tier for, you know, similar ideas to what we've been talking about. He's back. No one's playing him. He's in a very, very popular game. You know, 4,700. I get Sammy Watkins doesn't feel like sexy or whatever, but you know, 2 or 3, second or third in targets on the Chiefs offense, a chalky offense in a great spot. Also think there's like matchup reasons to think that he could, you know, really be strong here with all the blitzing that the Bucs do and the pressure that they bring. You know, he can be kind of a safety outlet that we've seen Tyreek actually kind of be the last couple of weeks. So he's just a way to get a little bit different in your Mahomes stacks that I'm really high on. But just this tier, I think, is really, really strong for tournaments because nobody is playing these guys, even whether it's secondary correlations or including in your stacks.
Yeah, and I like that. You know, it's another guy you mentioned there. I mentioned T.Y. Hilton. I'm going to scroll down here and skip over some of this just because I want to mention it. But I do think, you know, at 2% ownership, it's a spot that I can go back, you know, with Rivers being healthy and in now. It was questionable this week, but expected him to play. A lot of talk on Pittman already, as we mentioned. So I think this is interesting. I also think I mentioned earlier, Henry, and then to get another cheap guy in there like T.Y. across from him inside on turf. No TDs this season thus far. So that's my bold call of the week is he's going to turn that around this week. I can't remember if it's his mom or his grandmother who's been on his case, but you know, this guy's got to get in the end zone. I think it's this week at 3.9K when nobody's on him. And then still some time here. Let's talk quick about these cheap guys. So Cole, Chenault, you know, there's a bunch of other Isabella, Gabriel Davis, maybe, you know, bring these ones into the forefront, and then Oz for Atlanta. Now, what are you doing with these 5? Talk about those guys, and then we'll move to tight end and get to some questions at the end.
Yeah, it's really tricky. One other guy that I wanted to bring up that I kind of haven't been thinking about until like last night, this morning, but as a really strong, to me, secondary correlation off of your like Robert Woods play is a guy that Deebo Samuel is going to be what, less than 1% or something like that, like just something absurdly low owned at 5,400. Again, falls in that middle tier. And I get the Niners are not the team that we're all like excited about playing, and it's not a great matchup, but no George Kittle, no Brandon Ayuk for that offense. And Deebo is back with no injury designation. Normally we would be salivating to play a 49ers wide receiver without any of those guys. And he's going to be completely unowned. Another perk of him is he's a late game guy. So like you can kind of see how, you know, if you want to pit, you know, if things go well for you in the early games, you can pivot to some of these late game guys, you know, either play him because he's unowned or pivot off of him to a more popular guy that you feel better about.
And leave a couple spots open too, because there's still the Jordan Reed news to come out there as well, which we'll talk about in a second with tight end. But yeah, go ahead. Still, sorry to cut you off, but go ahead with those lower owned guys or the lower priced guys, I should say. Yeah,
just the lower price guys. It's really hard for me to ignore Gabriel Davis because I've just been a big fan of his all year. I've been playing him pretty much every time that John Brown goes out, and it worked once and didn't work against the freaking Jets. I don't know how that happened, but I'm just really bullish on him, and I think with God dang it, whoever their slot cornerback is, I think can help slow down Cole Beasley, who has really picked up a lot of the kind of John Brown volume when he's been out, and I think that just gives Gabe some more upside. He's kind of a shaky play, as weird as it sounds. He plays 100% of the snaps, but he's a little shaky just because he's inconsistent as a rookie. He's my favorite, but I think the strongest like tournament play, in my opinion, is the Jaguars guys. I think it's for a couple different reasons. The Browns defense is going to be wildly popular, and they're hurting. Myles Garrett's not there. Denzel Ward is not there. That's their best two defensive players. I mean, maybe the defensive player of the year in Garrett. So Mike Glennon is not good, but they can have some success throwing the ball. Laviska Shenault can play, and I think Keelan Cole can play, and even Colin Johnson on the other side is not a bad rookie. He's more of a big shot play and red zone guy. But I think that talent is a little bit better than people give it credit for, and it actually provides kind of quasi leverage off of that. If especially like if you use Hunt, like you like Hunt, or I like Chubb, that's a awesome tournament correlation in my opinion, using those guys and foregoing the Browns defense, because you can bust up 20 to 30% of the field that plays the Browns defense if Keelan Cole has 100 yards and 2 touchdowns or something.
Yeah, that's where I was going with it. You can use Hunt or Chubb and then just run it back with one of those guys, and you don't have to get to the Glennon stacks for everyone was bringing it up in the chat. But I'm with you there. I like going the extra step, but maybe unnecessary. Let's move to tight end. Got about 5 minutes left. There's a lot of questions in there, so I'd like to get to some of those. But let's talk about tight end. Maybe just a quick overview of things as you see it, and then we'll move to some of the questions. Yeah,
we can go. I think tight end is pretty tough. I think, Kelsey is my favorite, but he's also the field's favorite. I think I'm not super worried about tight end ownership. I should say I'm not playing Waller, but that's just because I'm not like stacking that game or anything. I'm more interested in like using Kelsey as a secondary correlation, like a Kelsey Godwin, or obviously using Kelsey with my Mahomes stacks, and then Hunter Henry as my favorite tournament tight end. But I do think there are punts available. You mentioned Jordan Reed. I think the Jordan Reed news is going to be 100% overlooked at tight end, and Tyler Higbee in that game is also questionable, which would open up Gerald Everett. I know those guys are not super sexy, whether it's Ross Dwelly or Jordan Reed plays, or if Higbee sits, Gerald Everett would probably be one of the better punt tight ends we've had all year if we knew Higbee was out. But nobody's, but just given the way the slate's played out, nobody's going to play him. So I do think, I like Kelsey just like everybody else does. I like Hunter Henry in those stacks, but I think there's a lot of merit in kind of waiting and seeing what happens in that Rams 49ers game, because worst case scenario, you play Higbee or Reed, or you play Everett, even though he's only going to get 50% of snaps. Like, that's okay. He can still score a touchdown.
Well, yeah, there's that. And like you said, too, just, you can build up some lineups with a guy like Jordan Reed in it. And if he's out, you've got Everett in that same game, or drop down to Ross Dwelly. And we know Mullins loves his tight end. So I think that's a way to do it for some large field stuff. Obviously, one of the biggest edges is still late swap, but I'll leave it with that because I do want to answer some of these questions. We still got 3 or 4 minutes here. So first one was Carr and Waller, or pick a different, where I'm going to pick it up from. I think for me, that one's a little, where if someone's going to go Carr, which is already lower owned, they are going to go to Waller. So I would look to add maybe one more, or make sure you get someone lower owned from Atlanta, maybe a Carr, Waller, and run it back with Oz versus, Ridley, because you have the money and everyone's going that way. So I would look to be a little bit different there. What are your thoughts on guys like Devontae Parker and Jamison Crowder for cash?
Ooh, for cash, I would not be on personally Crowder for cash. I do think I did start to play around with a cash build I haven't built yet. So forgive me if I lead you astray, but I do think Devontae Parker falls in a range where I have ended up quite a bit. And, the matchup is perfect. There's, I guess, maybe some game script concerns, but Fitz loves him. I think he's a pretty high floor play. So I think he's definitely in play for cash. I prefer him to Crowder.
Yeah, I agree. I'm definitely on that. I like Parker on both FanDuel and DraftKings and cash, but it's one or the other. I like him more on FanDuel because of the touchdowns, and he can have these bad games. Normally it's a guy like Jefferson, who I'm going to go to on DraftKings, where that 8 for 130 and 0 is still a huge score with the bonuses and the full point, versus a guy like Parker can do 6 for 60 with a touchdown, and on FanDuel that's sort of right there with that. It's only a couple points shy. So a couple things on defense. Saints D, Denver D, Jets D. You talk about that for a second if you want, and then I'll answer the last ones even if I go over. It's fine.
Yeah, you mentioned it earlier, but I think the thing that stuck out to me the most at defense is, like, I get the Saints thing, right? And I'm not telling, like, if you want to play the Saints, play the Saints. But I think there's more benefit in tournaments to kind of assuming that the Broncos just line up and try to run every single play, which is actually not. It seems good that they're not going to give up any points, but that's actually not good for our defenses. if the opponent is not passing. I would rather my defense gives up 30 points if the other team's throwing 50 times than my defense gives up 3 points and the other team never throws. So I'm probably not playing the Saints in tournaments just because the ownership is too high for what I think could be super heavy run script. The one that's the Browns are strong, and I think the Broncos are the best punt defense. But I think the tournament defense that I'm really trying to get to, I haven't made it work yet in my main team, is the Dolphins, which you mentioned. On a normal week, the Dolphins have been one of the best defenses in the NFL. I don't think people realize it. Their DBs are elite, and they have an elite pass rush, and they're facing the Jets. And I know the Jets got Darnold back, and the receivers are getting a little bit healthier, but they're also missing some offensive linemen, and it's still the Jets. So I think you're getting maybe the highest upside defense, really low owned. So I'm trying to get to them if I can.
Yeah, I like the Miami call. I also like the Jets, the other side, just for a price play only, right? Against Fitz. It's, he can definitely throw some interceptions and whatnot there, 2,100. Last question, Donnie asks, are you running any 3-2s with Tampa Bay, Kansas City? Absolutely. I'm running game stacks, both sides. Mahomes with his guys and Brady with his guys. We talked about Evans, Godwin, Brown, not really getting much ownership there. So besides Brown. So definitely doing that. Eric, man, thank you for coming on, man. Love chatting with you. It's always a good time. Everybody in the chat, sorry we couldn't get to all the questions. There's some more stuff coming up next. Keep flying your questions in there. Thank you guys for all the support. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's @ToeTagAndTambo. Other than that, thank you and good luck.
Back at the Fantasy Bar, 6 of my favorite plays for week 12, including a stud running back I think is going to go overlooked. What high Vegas total game is being ignored? And of course, my favorite play of the week. Who is it? Belly up to the Fantasy Bar and find out. Welcome in, guys. Week 12 edition Beers Daily Fantasy 6-pack. Hope everybody out there had a great Thanksgiving. I know it was a little different this year, but hopefully you got some quality time with some family, friends, and of course some football. So hopefully you did well on that Thanksgiving slate, but we are here to talk the main slate on week 12, and I am back with 6 of my favorite plays covering both FanDuel and DraftKings. Guys, before we get into the plays for this week, as always, very simple request for you. Hit that thumbs up button. That's the tip jar here in the Fantasy Bar. I greatly appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel as well to get notified when these videos are coming out. All right, quick look back at week 11. Decent week. More green than red is what we're looking for. Deontay Johnson, very good to us here. And the running backs were usable. They got it done. But we move on to week 12. So let's start at that running back position. A guy I think is in an amazing spot that's going to go overlooked here. Kareem Hunt of the Browns. Now, look, no issue with Hunt or Nick Chubb. I think both guys can go off in this matchup with Jacksonville. We'll touch on that in a minute. But the thing that really stood out to me here is the pricing. There's a huge gap now between Chubb and Hunt, and I don't think that gap is really justified here. We have a $1,500 gap on DraftKings between these two, even bigger over on FanDuel. I think Hunt's the guy you want here, and I will have some Chubb, no doubt. But I'm going to have a lot more Kareem Hunt in my lineups here against Jacksonville. Look, a few reasons why. He's still out snapping Nick Chubb. I know Chubb was the productive one last week, is going to get it done on the ground, but Hunt's the guy more involved in the passing game, more involved in the red zone as well. They seem to love to go to him when they get around the goal line, even in a down game. He did find the end zone last week, and against this Jacksonville team, like we mentioned, 6th most fantasy points allowed per game to the running back position. Love both of these Cleveland running backs this week, but I'm going to save some money and roll with Kareem Hunt as a value play here against this awful Jacksonville defense. Now let's stay at the running back position. Let's go back to back here. I promised you a stud that's going to go overlooked. I don't think many people are going to be rolling with Alvin Kamara of the Saints. Now we know Dalvin Cook pretty much a lock and load every single week. I mean, this guy continues to get favorable matchups. Love Dalvin Cook again this week. Too easy to put in the 6-pack here. But in that same pricing tier, in that stratosphere of running backs, I think Alvin Kamara really going to go overlooked here. Let's think about last week. We saw Taysom Hill make his debut as the starter, and things didn't go so well for Alvin Kamara. Only 1 target in that game. We know Taysom going to steal some rushing opportunities as well. All in all, public sentiment way down on Alvin Kamara here, and that's kind of factoring in to the ownership here. Looking like under 15% on Alvin Kamara this week. And anytime I get a guy like this at that kind of ownership, I'm going to take advantage. I expect these numbers to jump up. I expect him to be much more involved in the passing game. This is a game on the road I think can be competitive here with the Denver Broncos. And the Broncos have really struggled with running backs, especially of late. Over the last 4 weeks of the season, Denver bottom 3 in fantasy points allowed to the running back position here. So let's take advantage. There's plenty of value on this slate. I'm paying up this week. Alvin Kamara against the Denver Broncos. All right, speaking of value, let's save you some money at the wide receiver position with Nelson Aguilar of the Raiders. Now, I look at pricing here as well, and I'd say wide receiver 1 under 5K, and a lot of people are going to say he's not the wide receiver 1. That's Henry Ruggs. I disagree. Now, if you want to make an argument for Darren Waller as the pass catcher 1 on this team, that's fine, but we're talking about a Raiders team with a projected team total of over 28 points in this game against Atlanta. We're talking about a Falcons defense we know has been outstanding against the run here. So if you're thinking Josh Jacobs, I think the passing game is the way to go here. Very, very much a pass funnel is this Falcons defense. In fact, 2 wide receivers, 3rd most fantasy points allowed over the course of the season. We saw Aguilar play very well in that game against the Chiefs. I know he's an up and down, boom bust kind of guy, but indoors here in a great matchup with Atlanta, and you can't beat these prices. Nelson Aguilar, my favorite value at the wide receiver position. Now, we mentioned Darren Waller. That's exactly where we're going here next at the tight end position. Now, Aguilar won't have a ton of ownership. Waller probably going to be one of the more higher owned tight ends we have on this slate, and I have no problem eating that chalk, looking like Kelsey and Waller going to gobble up a lot of ownership here, but with good reason. I mean, let's look at the consistency here with this guy. If you're talking cash games, 5 or more receptions in almost every single game this season. So you're getting that floor there with those targets. You're also getting upside with Darren Waller. Why? We mentioned how bad Atlanta is against wide receivers. They're even worse against tight ends. In fact, allow the most fantasy points to that position in the entire NFL. So the old double stack, very, very valuable in these tournaments. A lot of people out there, the general public, do not utilize this. So don't be afraid to stack these Raiders. Super high team total here. Great matchup with Atlanta. Aguilar, Waller, the guys I want here against the Falcons. So we like that game. Let's go to the other side and run it back with wide receiver Calvin Ridley of the Falcons. So Julio Jones looks like he's going to be a game time decision, and this could go one of 2 ways. Either he doesn't play. That's great news for Calvin Ridley, obviously. Even if he does play, Julio Jones, one of those guys that does not perform well when he tries to play through injuries. So that's also good news for Calvin Ridley. So no matter how this plays out, I think Ridley going to be a big benefactor here. And the focus of this Atlanta attack, consistency, we talked about it with Darren Waller. This guy's only been under 14 DraftKings points twice this season. And in fact, 6 of his 9 games this season, he's gone for 18 or more. So again, nice floor in cash games, huge upside in tournaments. We've seen many games where Calvin Ridley's 30, approaching 40 fantasy points. In this game, for some reason, a lot of people don't seem to be on this game looking at ownership projections. Seems like Buffalo, Chargers is popping, Chiefs, Tampa Bay, a marquee game people are going after. But this game right up there total-wise, but ownership not reflecting that on most of these players, including Calvin Ridley. Now, if Julio Jones gets ruled out, maybe that ownership jumps up. I don't care. I love this spot here against the Raiders. Stack this game up. These are the pieces I want the most. Aguilar, Waller, and Calvin Ridley. All right, it's time to take a look at my favorite play for Week 12. But before we do that, guys, we're going to continue our Beast of the Week contest. Very easy. Get in the comment section. Make sure you've hit that thumbs up button. All you have to do is guess fantasy points. We'll go with FanDuel this week for my favorite play of the week. And the winner, closest guess, is going to get themselves 1 week of free Rotogrinders Premium. I said free, gives you access to everything we have, including Lineup HQ, gives you the ability to make a ton of lineups in a matter of moments, but a peek behind the curtain. Or if you're already a premium subscriber, hey, we'll send you a free Rotogrinders t-shirt. So let's wrap up Week 12. Look at my favorite play. You know, Matt's the Beast of the Week. All right, Beast time. We owe you one more player. We owe you a quarterback here. I'm pretty sure you can guess who it is. We're going to complete that double stack with Derek Carr against the Falcons, this week's Beast of the Week. Now, clearly, I love this spot. We haven't had a double stack here in the 6-pack in quite some time, but that's how passionate and how much I love this spot for this Vegas passing game against the Atlanta Falcons. Now, let's take a look at Derek Carr. Again, been very consistent here multiple touchdown passes now in 7 of his last 9 games. Gives you a little bit of rushing upside. Not a ton, but he's not a zero in that department. That always helps. Vegas, huge team total. We continue to mention it. Only the Chiefs at Tampa Bay have a higher team total this week, and Vegas projected to score over 4 touchdowns in this game. And we mentioned how tough Atlanta's been on the run. You got to think Vegas going to attack through the air here. And we talked about the Falcons being bad against receivers, tight ends. You nailed it. You guessed it. No team has allowed more production to the quarterback position than the Atlanta Falcons. So we get low ownership here. We get a dream spot against a bad defense against the pass. Stack these Raiders up. Even if not, Derek Carr, playable in all formats. The price is fair. The matchup is there. Derek Carr, easily my favorite play for Week 12.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to Crunch Time NFL Edition in what has to be the wildest week of the season so far. And that's not even with bad weather. The weather is nice. Everything else is absolutely bonkers. So to sort it all out with the COVID madness and everything else, we got 2 very smart people joining us. We have one, Christy Metzger. As always, good to have you, Christy.
Hey, it's great to see you. Great to be back again this week.
Now, the people are always clamoring for more of your advice, so we are happy to have you here. And then we are joined here by special guest host. We have Cards joining us. Justin, what's up, man?
Yeah, I'm certainly not special. I'm just going to try to fill Tuttle's shoes. We'll see how that goes. But we've done the old crunch time before in other sports, so happy to be on here leading up to lineup lock. I'm not sure if these next 3 or 4 weeks are going to be the most optimal weeks to be handling it right up to lock. But the good news with football is that, we tend to get the inactives at least, an hour or so in advance. So a little bit of time to prepare, which right now is good because over the last 24 hours, this slate has changed a bunch of different ways. So it's going to be an interesting afternoon.
Yes, it has flipped on its head, as I think Overzet has been saying repeatedly over and over and over. A couple questions here. Over the next 29 minutes, we're not expecting anything to break the slate here, right? You think we've got what we need, Cards, as far as...
I sure hope so.
Okay. This isn't going to be an NBA situation.
I don't think so. There's really nobody I think that we're still waiting on that we don't already have clarity, other than maybe the late afternoon games, but there's not a whole lot of those. And, there's only 3 late afternoon games, and Denver is one of them. We got that news yesterday. The San Francisco running back situation might be a little bit murky heading up until kickoff there, but it's not a major spot. So otherwise, I think we've got our info.
Okay, so the one thing I want to start with, which is unusual, is I'd like to kind of go over the COVID plays, the guys who are playable because somebody else is out. Christy, can you give us like a brief run through of the guys who are getting tremendous bumps because somebody's not there?
Yeah, well, for one, obviously the Denver situation really, took a turn. They're down 4 quarterbacks because of COVID, obviously, which is a very unique situation. So it looks like Kendall Hinton is going to get the start there off of the practice squad. So they're forced to start him this week. Also, Jonathan Taylor, and we saw that yesterday. I believe he's out because of COVID too. Obviously bumping up Naheem Hines, which, would be a good tournament play. But I think he's going to be a very chalky play today. He's still sharing the backfield with Jordan Wilkins, but became definitely more prominent today because of COVID.
Okay, that's it. I thought there was like 9 of these, but it's just those 2 situations.
Well, Cards, do you have some more too? Those are the ones that kind of stuck out. I know there's some that are coming up on later games, but or on Monday, I should say. But
Yeah, those are the main ones because of the COVID changes. We do have Julio Jones out, but that's an injury issue. It's still a pretty impactful one on today's slate. We had a lot of injuries happen last week. Obviously, Joe Burrow is out. Cincinnati seems to be missing about half their team. And then, the Baltimore-Pittsburgh game with all the issues there got pushed to Tuesday. So the big ones with COVID are obviously the Broncos and then with Jonathan Taylor. So otherwise, there is a lot of news. Most of it's injury related.
Okay, and then this Broncos quarterback, we can't start him, right? Because you have to play him as quarterback. Is that correct?
Yeah, and one of the wildest moves ever, FanDuel, you had Taysom Hill as a tight end last week. But now this practice squad wide receiver, somehow FanDuel had him listed as a quarterback, which ends up being correct because he's going to start at quarterback today. So he's not playable. I mean, the Broncos team total last I checked is 10 points. It's just unnecessary. You've got other starting quarterbacks that are at the same or just a couple $100 more in terms of salary. And then on DraftKings, I don't even think he's available as an option. But let me double check that here. We'll try punching him into lineup HQ. Yeah, I don't think he's even on there in their player pool because he was on the practice squad. So, it doesn't really impact the builds at all, just because you're not playing him. If you could use him as a wide receiver somewhere, or if there's some, kind of under the radar site where you can use him at wide receiver, I think that's viable. But it's not this super sharp play. The Broncos aren't going to be scoring a ton of points today. The reason he moved from quarterback to receiver in college was because he couldn't play quarterback. So I wouldn't expect that to change at the NFL level, and it's going to be a struggle for Denver today.
Okay, excellent. Let's dive into this really quickly. Both of you have some Monkey Knife Fight. We've got a promo going on, and if you sign up, I believe you get 3 months of RG for free. If I've given away too many months again, I'm sorry about that, Devin. I tend to do that. But whatever Devin types in the chat, yeah, there you go. 3 months of RG Core 4. So really quick, Christy, what do you have for our Monkey Knife Fight promo?
Yeah, I did a couple plays from Denver, actually. I went the under on Hamler. I just don't think they're going to be able to get anything done in the passing game. So I like that one a lot. And then I went the over for fantasy points for Melvin Gordon. I think they're going to have to run the ball a lot. I think, both he and Lindsey are a factor, but I just think that one's a little bit easier to get to. And it was at 9.5 when I looked at that earlier. So those are 2 plays that I like this week.
Cards?
Yeah, I think that the Cleveland-Jacksonville game is really interesting to me. I actually kind of like some points in that game. It's a little bit weird because Jacksonville's going to Mike Glennon at quarterback, and I don't think that they're going to let Mike Glennon just go out and throw it 40 times no matter what Glennon has said in the media. I mean, they're missing DJ Chark as well. So you're down to the likes of Laviska Shenault and Keelan Cole as the primary wide receivers there. They're going to try to give the ball to James Robinson early. So I like the under on Mike Glennon's passing numbers. But Jacksonville's defense is also extremely banged up. And I think this is a good shot for that Cleveland offense to get back on track. Jarvis Landry was the first prop that I bet today. His receiving yards prop on all the major sites is around 50. And his receptions prop is around 4.5 or 5, or, you can see the number there for Monkey Knife Fight. Whatever you can get Jarvis Landry at today, I like the over, just because I don't think Jacksonville has anybody in the secondary that's capable of slowing Cleveland down. You can play the over on Chubb. You can play the over on Baker Mayfield. I just think that Cleveland gets some points today. So those are my picks.
Okay, excellent stuff. Let's dive into this slate here. I've waited too long to really get us started. So we'll start at the quarterback position. Cards, I will let you go first here. Why don't you walk us through, what the chalk is, and then maybe a tournament play that you like.
Yeah, so ownership's pretty spread out here. You can see on I've got the screen share going. You can see the projected ownership. And there really isn't a whole lot of extreme chalk. There will be at other positions, but at quarterback, with all the value that's come out, you have seen a few more people trend toward Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, compared to where those ownership numbers were earlier in the week. They've slowly ticked higher throughout the last couple of days because you do have the salary to spend up. And I think if I'm making one lineup today, that's probably what I'm doing. Josh Allen with his dual threat ability, the league's leading receiver in Stephon Diggs. The Chargers have allowed 28 points in 6 straight games. And some of those games came against the Jets, the Jaguars, the Dolphins. I mean, the Chargers have been abysmal defensively, and I don't think that's getting enough attention. And with Josh Allen's dual threat ability, I actually like him better than Mahomes today. So I'll have a little bit more Josh Allen, a little bit less Patrick Mahomes. And then if you're looking to go cheap, Jared Goff is really cheap. Fitzpatrick is really cheap against the Jets. He'll get some ownership. So those are a few guys I like as well. If you're looking for a sub 4% owned guy, Kirk Cousins, again, I still think there's leverage there with everybody on Dalvin Cook. He was 2-3% owned last week and had a 300-yard day, so I don't mind him. Teddy Bridgewater on the other side of that game, if you believe the revenge narrative against his former team that let him go, I don't mind that play at 3 or 4% with his wide receivers getting some attention today as well. So that's kind of my overview at QB.
Okay, Christy, anything that you either strongly disagree with or that you want to add in there at quarterback?
Yeah, no, I really agree with his assessment. I think it is a little bit spread out this week. I definitely like Mahomes and Allen and Kyler Murray. I think paying up because there is some cheap value at the receiver and the running back is really a good way to do it this week. So those are a lot of the guys that I'm looking at. Justin Herbert, I would throw him in there as well. I think on the tournament side, I think Teddy Bridgewater is interesting, going up against his, revenge factor, going up against Minnesota. I do think he's a sneaky play. And Derek Carr, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Tom Brady are a few of the others that I think make pretty good GPP plays this week.
Excellent. Let's go to running back. Christy?
So for running back, I think this will be kind of interesting because obviously Dalvin Cook is going to carry a lot of ownership. He's getting really expensive. Especially on FanDuel, he's over 11K now, so very, very expensive. But I mean, he's in a fantastic matchup. So, on the cash game side, I think Cook is going to carry a lot of ownership. And then I also think, for some of the cheap value, we've got Brian Hill, who I think is going to be a good cash game play this week. And then you've got Nyheim Hines and kind of Wayne Gallman really in that same area. I think Hines is going to be the cash game play. So I wonder how much ownership Gallman will actually carry this week. I think he makes a great tournament play. I wrote him up earlier before this news hits, but I like pivoting to him. With Nyheim Hines, you still have Wilkins in the mix a little bit, but Hines just tore up Tennessee a couple weeks ago and put a couple touchdowns on them. So I think he's a very good play. So I think those are some cash game plays. I also think Derrick Henry is certainly cash game viable this week, and I think he's a fantastic play. They are Indy's down 3 offensive linemen. So, I mean, he's in a really smash spot, in my opinion. So I think you could certainly use him for cash. And then I also think, Nick Chubb, too. You could probably use him for cash, but makes a great play. I like him more so on DraftKings this week. And then I would also say one other guy for tournaments on DraftKings. I think James White is interesting at $4,500. I don't think he'll carry much ownership at all, but you could pivot to him. He's right in the same price range as Hines.
Okay. Cards, any of those plays that you hated and anyone else you want to add in?
Yeah, I like some of those calls, particularly for tournaments. Gallman was one of the guys I put in my Core Stacks article this week, and the ownership has steadily gone down on Gallman throughout the week because we had Hines come into the mix. We had Brian Hill come into the mix. So I love Gallman in tournaments. If you look at, I brought up his card just a minute ago. If you look at his touches,
he's their guy, right? Yeah, he gets all their carries essentially.
Yeah, so 10, 12, 14, 18 the last 4 weeks. So he's kind of steadily been going up. He's found the end zone in all of those games. Cincinnati does not have Joe Mixon. They don't have Joe Burrow. They're not going to be able to hang onto the ball. And if you look at the total in this game, or at least the line in the game, you can see the Giants have a team total of about 26. The Bengals have a team total of 19. So the Giants are favored by a touchdown. Cincinnati's only got a team total of 19 points. I like the idea of pairing Gallman with the Giants defense. Mm-hmm. And if the Giants happen to dominate that game, maybe get a defensive touchdown, you get Gallman more looks. It's not that Wayne Gallman is this exceptional, number one NFL back, but neither is Nyheim Hines, and 40% of people are playing him. And I don't dislike Hines. I mean, I think in cash games, your pool is probably these four for most people. It's probably Hines, Cook, Robinson, and Hill. Pick three of those four guys. I think Chubb and Henry are maybe on the fringe of that. And if we wouldn't have gotten Hill and Hines as values, then I think you would see more people using Chubb and Henry. But so I don't think you need to use Gallman and Cash, but I think he's a great pivot off of Hill and Hines in those tournament builds. Eckler is a guy I'm largely avoiding. I think I put him in my GPP builds at like 5 or 6%. They did say they aren't expecting him to have his full workload in his first game back. He has been out for like a month and a half. So I worry a little bit on Eckler, but there's interesting guys in here at sub 10% simply because of all the ownership congregating around, those top guys. Mostert, if he happens to get, a full workload today, would be really sneaky. And the Broncos guys. I mean, we don't expect Denver to throw the ball, and we've got almost no ownership on Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay, and they're probably just going to run it all day. So, Christy mentioned Gordon as a monkey knife fight prop. I think you can use him in DFS too. It's not sexy, but with everybody playing the Saints D, there is some leverage there as well. So really interesting running back options today.
Great stuff. Okay, let's go to wide receiver, and Cards, you can lead us off on this one.
All right, pull that up. So Jefferson is the lock button for most people. Thielen is out with COVID, positive COVID test. And you look at what Jefferson's been able to do. I'll see if I can scroll this over here. Sometimes it doesn't work.
Most people. Does that include?
What's that?
You said most people. He's the lock.
Yeah. No, I love Jefferson. I mean, I think he's the best receiver in this rookie class. And, his numbers have been a little bit inconsistent, but if you look at the last, he's got 4 100-yard games, 10 targets there, 11 targets there, 5 targets there with a 100-yard game, 9 targets there, 175 yards. And the inconsistent numbers are a little bit of a concern, but you got to remember that almost all these games were with Adam Thielen in the mix. They don't have Thielen today. They don't have Irv Smith. So all they're left with is, Kyle Rudolph, who is basically a red zone target and maybe 5-yard catches kind of guy. Jefferson is really the only field stretcher that they have. So I don't see how you don't play Jefferson today. Especially on DraftKings with his salary still at $6,300. So he's my number one. I like Diggs and Ridley. If you can get one of those guys in as well, then, I think your third receiver spot can be a little bit more up in the air. Robert Woods is pretty cheap on DraftKings. DeAndre Hopkins is one of my favorite tournament plays today. It's been pretty rare the week where we've seen Hopkins in single digits. I know he's got a tough coverage matchup today against New England, but he's about as matchup proof as they come. And then Gabriel Davis as a min salary punt. Both him and Andy Isabella, I think, are worth a look as punts today. Larry Fitzgerald is out with COVID. That's one of the other COVID issues that I forgot to mention at the top of the show. So Isabella should get more snaps. John Brown's out for Buffalo, so Gabriel Davis should get more snaps. People will be on Cole Beasley as well. I'm not as enamored with him. I think I'd rather take the 3K punt with Davis. So those are some of my faves.
Okay, Christy, do you agree with all those faves, or was there someone there you're like, nah, I'm not touching that guy?
Yeah, no, I really agree with his assessment for sure. Jefferson is at the top of my list too. I think he's a fantastic play today. He'll be very popular in cash, of course, but great tournament play as well. One of my favorite tournament plays this week is Tyreek Hill. I'm really high on the Chiefs offense and really like targeting the Kansas City Tampa Bay game. He's just been doing his thing all year long, and his matchup really couldn't be much better this week. I think it was Robert Woods last week that really tore them up too. So I really like him. On FanDuel, Cooper Kupp is an interesting price to me, so I think he's kind of an interesting tournament play. Someone that I'm looking at. A couple cash game plays I think you could mix in there too. I think you could consider Nelson Aguilar as a cash game play. He's pretty cheap. And he's, they've been looking at him as their wide receiver 1, and he scored out of 5 of the last 7 games. So I think he's someone if you need to save some money. Curtis Samuel is another guy that I like too. He's been getting even some rushing yards in there too, but I think he has good upside in that offense. And then Antonio Brown, if you need to bring it back on the Tampa Bay side, Antonio Brown in particular on DraftKings is really cheap at $5,700. I think he's a fine play. I don't think there'll be many people playing Evans and Godwin, but you could certainly target them on the other side if you're doing a full Kansas City stack. And then I'm not sure if we mentioned Keelan Cole or not. DraftKings, again, he's cheap and he's 5,300 on FanDuel. He should get a lot of looks in that offense just with Shark out and Conley out. So definitely someone that I will have exposure to as well.
Excellent. Tight end, you can start with us. Chris, you can start it. Christy, you know what I mean. Go for it.
Exactly. Well, I think, we've been waiting for a week like this. Usually tight end is hard. And, you've got a lot of, if you don't have someone to pay up for, it's hard to target some guys in the middle. So, we've got Kelsey and Waller this week, they're going to carry a ton of ownership, and rightfully so. I have a lot of Kelsey in my lineups this week, have some Waller too. If you're looking to save money, I think Rudolph is a good play. He's cheap on DraftKings. I think he's $2,800. I think he's $4,600 on FanDuel. So he makes a lot of things work. I'm not necessarily going that route this week because I like being able to get, Kelsey or someone that you can really count on the points. And then Evan Ingram too. He's a guy that, he's been getting looks, and I think he's also in a good matchup. But for me, I think, paying up is really the way to go to, especially since we're afforded some salary savers at wide receiver and even on the running back side this week.
Cards, what are you looking at for tight end?
Yeah, I think you have to play one of Kelsey and Waller in cash. There's no reason to go anywhere else. You've got the salary to do it. We've got them at 22 and 22% each in tournaments. I think in cash games, they'll probably take up about 65% of the ownership there, just because we've got salary savers at running back. We've got salary savers at receiver, and you don't need to save here because we know how inconsistent some of these guys are. Whereas with Kelsey and Waller, that the targets are going to be there on a weekly basis. Kelsey, you look at his fantasy point production, it's been so consistent. So I'm a little less excited about the Kansas City offense on the whole compared to the DFS community. I think that Tampa Bay will show up a little bit today after getting obliterated on Monday night defensively with Jared Goff and all those short passes that the Rams threw at him. I think you'll see Tampa put up a fight today. So I'll be underweight on the Kansas City offense as a whole, but I do have more of them than I thought I would earlier in the week because of all the value that's popped up and kind of gives you the ability to spend. So Kelsey, it's just difficult to fade him at him or Waller at those prices. I don't have a lot of hot takes. It's all these guys, the rest of them are touchdown dependent. I'm not playing Noah Fant now with Denver's issues at quarterback. So he's out of my player pool. Henry, I think, is fine. I think that Chargers Buffalo game is stackable because you've got Herbert, you've got Allen, you've got Diggs, you've got Keenan Allen, you've got Henry, you've got Eckler back today. So I think especially if you're running some Herbert, I think Hunter Henry is fine. Otherwise, I agree with what Christy mentioned there.
Okay, let's move it to defense here. Let's see. Brian says, what about Chiefs D to put some pressure on Brady and make things happen? He's been throwing some pick sixes. It's a thing he does these days. So where are you looking as far as defense?
Yeah, I think the Chiefs are interesting. This is a good week to maybe be a little bit contrarian at defense. Cleveland and the Saints are going to be popular. I think on FanDuel, maybe these ownership projections are flipped. Cleveland's pretty cheap on DraftKings. But we all know that the defense position is highly variant. The Saints are probably going to hold Denver to a low point total today, but how much is Denver going to throw? How many turnovers are the Saints going to be able to get?
Right. I
don't think the Saints are a bad play, and I don't think the Browns are a bad play. I think in cash, you play one of those two defenses, and it's fine. But in tournaments, there's merit to going with a lot of these other defenses today. The Jets are winless. You can play Miami's defense. The Giants I like against Brandon Allen and whatever Cincinnati. They've got so many offensive injuries that I think the Giants are a strong play. As I mentioned earlier, I think you compare them with Gallman. All it takes is a turnover, a defensive touchdown. And we saw the Chiefs earlier this year. They had a game where they scored, I believe, on a pick six and a punt return in the same quarter. So Those are the types of things that win GPPs. And I think the Browns and the Saints are safe, but it's all going to depend on who gets that defensive touchdown. So for that reason, teams like Miami, even the Rams, I think the Chiefs, the Giants, I think those are teams that are in play for tournaments.
So a couple things on defense here. PayPal says Saints D should be 100% owned. They've crushed much better offenses in Atlanta and Tampa Bay. But the issue, as you were saying, is if a team is just handing off, you're not getting sack bonuses, interception bonuses, right? That's the problem here?
Yeah, I mean, and you wonder, okay, if Denver's down, I think this game could be 10-6 or something goofy like that. I mean, it's not like the Saints with Taysom Hill are this offensive juggernaut. They're going to run the ball too. This is going to be the most boring, clock moving the whole time kind of game. I think it's fascinating because of Denver's issues. And so the question becomes, what if the Saints get up 2 scores? Does Denver try to push it and throw the ball down the field? I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, they might just give up. Who knows? Or they could, originally Royce Freeman was their emergency quarterback. He's a running back. So they could just decide, okay, we're going to put Freeman back there. We're going to run the Wildcat all game. We're going to put 2 running backs in the backfield, and we're going to try this, we're just going to try to jam it down their throat and see what happens. Yeah, the Saints could get a pick 6, and then, okay. But if they get 2 and you don't play them, then you're in trouble. But I'm always going to, to recommend that in tournaments, you can go with a different defense because of how variant it is. I'm going to try to pivot this over to FanDuel to see what their ownership is over there, because I feel like it was higher when I looked at it earlier.
Okay, well, we've got like 4 minutes, so let's dive into some questions real quick, if that's all right.
Go for it. No problem.
Jay says, are we crazy not to have AB or Godwin over Jefferson and DK Cash?
No, I think you got to play Jefferson. That said over Jefferson, right?
Right, yeah. No, you're not crazy to not. That was like a double negative there.
Yeah, you got to play Jefferson.
Yeah. Yankee says, DK Cash, Ridley or Chubb in my flex for Cash. Christy?
I do like both of them, but I'd probably put Chubb in there. I think he's in a fantastic spot this week, but they're both great plays.
All right. ECS says, DK Cash, is Chenault okay in order to jam in JJ and Diggs?
Yeah, I think Chenault's fine in cash games at 3,300 there. I have no issue with that. He should get plenty of looks today.
S. Berger says Tyreek and Gesicki is a DK GPP. Tyreek and Gesicki or Kelsey and Curtis Samuel?
I'd probably go Kelsey and Curtis Samuel.
Okay. What is your favorite stack here, or your favorite correlation that you're playing? Someone said, was it Tampa D? What's your favorite correlation? Go for it.
In tournaments, I like Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins today. Just not a lot of times we've been able to get them at single-digit ownership. So I think you can take some leverage there. Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs are great. That'll be a little bit more chalky. So depending on what type of build you're making or what you have in the rest of your lineup, Allen and Diggs, if you're looking for safety, and then Kyler and Hopkins if you're feeling a little more frisky.
Okay, and it was the Giants running back. It was Gallman and Giants D that you had mentioned earlier, not Fox.
Yeah, I like that as a running back defense pairing as well. I think that's good in tournaments too.
Christy, you got a favorite stack or correlation?
Yep, I'm on the Chiefs this week. I really like Tyreek, and so Mahomes and Tyreek is a combo that I have quite a bit. I just like the two of those. I think Tyreek will be under-owned in general. I think Mahomes is going to carry a little bit more ownership than I first thought, but that's definitely my favorite pairing this week.
Okay, Donnie says, Christy, gun to your head. That's unnecessary. She'll answer it either way. Christy, Godwin or Evans? I know you said you like Tampa Bay.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It really is. I'd probably go Godwin. I know the prices are pretty close, but I think I'd go with Godwin.
Brendan says, DK Cash, Hines and Chenault or Brian Hill and Wilkins?
Don't play Wilkins in cash. The one that doesn't include Wilkins.
All right. Maz says, best pay down for a cash game quarterback. Is it Ryan? Is it Carr? Is it Fitz?
I could see doing, probably Carr or Fitz is where I'd probably land.
All right. I think we're ranking cheap receivers here in DK Cash cards. There's 5 of them. So maybe just give me your 3 favorites here.
Okay.
It's Cole, Chenault, Gabriel Davis, Isabella.
I like Chenault over Cole. I think they're close, but I think Chenault has a little bit higher ceiling. It's a real toss-up between Gabriel Davis and Isabella. In cash, I think Gabriel Davis. In tournaments, I think Isabella. I think Chenault's number 1, and then number 2 is Davis in cash, Isabella in tournaments.
Excellent stuff. Okay. Should we play both wide receivers on Jacksonville in DK cash?
I wouldn't in cash.
Yeah, that's not necessary because you've got Hill, you've got Hines, you just one of those Jacksonville receivers. There's enough other value. You don't need to do that.
Yep.
Dylan says, any love for Renfro and a GPP on DK?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, Waller's your guy if you want a pass catcher from there. There's no upside with Renfro or
right.
Aguilar.
508 Nate says, DK cash, Mims or Cole? Last piece in.
I would go Cole.
All right. Arizona running backs, any interest from Mike's daddy?
No. I wrote that game in the grind down this week. If you want to go back and review it, you can see why. But basically, it's a 50-50 snap split last week. And I'm not sold on Drake, at this point. And that game is going to be a quick-moving game with Hill and Hines and Gallman. I just don't think you need to trust Drake or Edmonds this week.
All right, last question. DK cash from Sean, Tyreek Hill or Keenan Allen?
Keenan Allen is probably the safer cash game play, but Hill for GPPs.
Okay. Devin, am I right saying that is? Okay. I got a quick note here. A couple things. First, I love that someone asked a GPP question, and it's so easy to answer, like, oh, it's a GPP. Like, it's fine. You can play. And you both were just like, no. Don't do it. Don't even take a shot on it in a GPP. Don't even throw a dart. That's just a terrible play. I love that. I love that conviction in your guys' answers. That's wonderful.
Yeah, Renfro's going to go nuts now. I know it.
I think the same thing.
Second thing I want to note is that, hey, guys, if you like this content, if you enjoy shows like this, we do them almost all day long for every sport. We have so much content on Rotogrinders. Now is a great time to become a premium member. It is, without question, the best deal in the biz. And you have some of the most experienced and best experts giving you that advice. Plus, you get weather advice. So, I highly recommend you check out the Rotogrinders Core 4 program. I still believe we are giving $5 off. And if we're not, Devin can yell at me. But as of last check, that was the plan. So as always, we can hang out here and talk for a while, or we could go watch football. Cards, you get to choose. What do you think we do?
I don't care. I'm up for a few extra minutes.
You're supposed to, you missed the bit. You're supposed to go to
Hey, I'm a first timer here. I'm not going to tell everybody, hey, we're getting out of here. I'm not going to, I got to toe the line here.
No, we generally, it's hilarious how, like, leading up to lock, there's so many questions. You hit lock and it is dead silence.
Everybody leaves. Everybody turned us off already.
Yeah, it's the only show I've been a part of where as soon as it hits the lock, everybody's out. And for that reason, we are getting out of here. Don't forget, if you are still watching, smash that like and subscribe button. Go ahead. We're giving this info away for free. So if you hit like and you subscribe to Rotogrinders, that would help us out. So for Christy, for Cards, for Devin, always working hard behind the scenes. Guys, we appreciate you. We love you. We'll catch you next week. You have been crushed.